I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can find me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can find me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I want to start off the show with a special guest. His name is Theo Wilson. He is the former policy advisor to RFK Jr. He's also the host of the History Channel series, I Was There. He's a poet, activist, and an advocate for Black lives and medical freedom. I want to go ahead without further ado and bring him in. What's going on, Theo? Thank you so much for joining me.
It is an honor to be here, Miss Sabby Sabs.
So I think the first question, a lot of us, I'm sure, as you know, we were very excited about RFK Jr.'s campaign in the beginning. It seemed like he had the right message, and we can go down that timeline. But I want to start from the very beginning. Why did you decide to be a part of the campaign? Was it something about RFK Jr. or was it something about his message that really resonated with you? Why did you decide to join that campaign in particular?
RFK Jr. at the time was the only Democrat at the time who saw medical freedom and Black lives as connected issues. And so it was the summer of 2020. It was George Floyd's summer. All sorts of wild stuff was happening at the Colorado State Capitol. And I got pulled into trying to message the idea of medical freedom to a Black audience. As you know, that's a pretty overwhelmingly white audience. And so I knew that forcing needles into the arms of Black people who have lost bodily autonomy as a matter of history is something that is historically triggering. And I could see at the time that if COVID was going the way it was going with the lockdowns, that vaccines were going to be forced too, which, by the way, they told us was conspiracy theory. And on the Capitol steps, this guy with a scratchy voice stepped up and he connected the dots. I spoke that day, and a brother named Del Bigtree from the High Wire had me on. And in short order, Del Bigtree was pulled into RFK Jr.'s campaign, and he said, we got to diversify the advisors around here. And before I knew it, I was on a plane to Hyannisport at the Kennedy compound. That's how it happened.
That is very interesting. Wow. So I think for those who are not aware, there are some of you that are newer to the channel. So I do just want to explain this in particular for myself. RFK Jr. made his campaign announcement here in Boston, Massachusetts. Right. I was there on the ground to cover that. I think I may have been one of the only independent media people there, like, to be honest with you, at that point in time. And there was a lot that he said during that campaign that I thought, or at least during that speech, that I thought, okay, this guy has a great message. The only criticism that I had at that point in time is that he was running through the Democratic Party, right? So I don't support the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So I said, I wonder if he would be willing to move out of that, which he eventually did. And we'll get to that. But what was really interesting to me is that at that point in time, there was a very diverse group that was there. Mm-hmm. And that's why I was a little bit confused as to, after the announcement, when it came to the appearances, it did seem like it went from this diverse group that was present at his campaign announcement to all of a sudden this is the pandemic candidate, right? So
Right.
he started to resonate with mainly with a large crowd that was critical of the lockdowns, et cetera. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it made me wonder, who was he trying to reach in the very beginning of the campaign when he was still a part of the Democratic Party? Was there a certain group that he was trying to reach? For example, was he trying to reach Biden voters that were disappointed with Joe Biden? Was he trying to reach non-voters? Who do you think he was trying to appeal to in the very beginning?
Absolutely everybody. He was siloed to the right wing. The left wing wouldn't talk to him. That's the best I can tell you. We had connections to CNN, we had connections to MSNBC, but only Fox News, only Newsmax would put him on. And that is because his stances on the vaccines, his stances on medical freedom had him branded as the crazy, kooky anti-vaxxer Bobby Kennedy Jr. They didn't want to hear about how he had economic policies that were extremely populist and sounded a little Bernie-esque, right? His name made him a threat. The fact that when I told my mother who I was working for, she said he got my vote off name recognition alone, because my mother was old enough to have voted for his father before he was assassinated. She was in California for those little primaries. So they feared him on the left. And this meant that there became a reverberating echo chamber where he was only getting on right-wing media. So this amplified the more right-wing voices within the campaign. He had a coalition of everybody. Dennis Kucinich was on the team. You feel me? There was a lot of people from the left and the right. And in time, because of how we were siloed into the right-wing media ecosphere, those voices began to win out.
So that's really interesting. I did notice that I think he had one appearance on CNN in the beginning, and then they didn't bring him back on. I do remember that.
For sure.
But speaking of media, aside from corporate media, there was also independent media. And I think this is where some people like myself and many of us that are voices on the left, which I consider to be more the true left, we were not a part of that equation. I really would have liked to have seen, and it didn't even have to be me, but I would have liked to have seen RFK Jr. on Katie Halper's show, on The Gray Zone, on he went on to Breaking Points, but Breaking Points has more of a conservative audience for the most part. It seemed like he was not willing to make appearances on those progressive left shows, like Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith, for example. She spoke to him on The Hill Rising, but he didn't come onto her show. And I felt like that was a mistake for his campaign, because there was a whole separate coalition of people that I think would have been receptive to at least most of his message. Now, we can get to the Israel-Gaza stuff a little bit.
Okay, let's go, because that's what happened, really.
But it just, to me, it's like he went on to the Jimmy Dore show, but he did not go on to any other left independent media shows. And I want to hear from you, why was that? Was that his decision, or was that the decision of the campaign?
Sabrina, when I first talked to you, I was inside the campaign trying to get him on your show. When I first spoke to you, I know exactly what you're talking about. Forces higher than me compelled him out of the left-wing independent atmosphere. And I really can't call it to this day. But I knew that what I really felt was a real big problem is that if they had to choose who to piss off, if they had to choose who to make angry, they were more comfortable making the left angry than the right. I thought that was a big issue, because numerically speaking, the left is actually bigger than the right. I know it don't seem like it with this past election, but the fact was there's this huge unserved demographic on the left that y'all were reaching out to. And I think that forces higher than me in the campaign stopped that from happening. So what I was resorted to do is I was the first one who got him on The Breakfast Club, that first go around in August of 2023. So I was trying to get him on more urban stations like that, but I was trying to book him on yours, and things just pulled him away. And I think that that momentum toward the right had already begun.
So I think what some of us assumed was it was the Israel issue. Because when RFK Jr. was on Jimmy Dore's show, he did commit to having a conversation with Max Blumenthal. It was the statement heard around the world. So we all heard it. We were like, okay, great. He's open to having a conversation with Max. But that conversation never happened. And we had to ask, like, why, out of all the people to run away from, why would you run away from someone who's an investigative journalist who has been to Gaza, who's been to Israel, and hear the other perspective? But then we see RFK Jr. go on to Breaking Points, which they pushed back on him too about that particular issue. So it looked like to us that he just made a decision that he was not interested in trying to appeal to the progressive or socialist left base. And I think, again, that was a mistake because he could have heard a perspective that maybe could have opened his mind a little bit. I do not know. But I don't understand if he was trying to bring people together, why would you avoid just that one group of people?
Let me tell you, sis, I had it out with him personally over this. And I said to him, and this ain't nothing new. Bobby sees this. He knows it. There was other people in the room. And I said to Bobby, you know that you had the David effect when you challenged Dr. Fauci. I said, right now, Max Blumenthal got the David effect against you. You need to square off with that man. You need to actually go toe to toe with him because, frankly, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the most rhetorically capable Zionist ideologue I've ever met. I've never seen somebody with the amount of nuanced data recall around the pro-Israel side as him. And the only person that I knew that could actually go toe to toe with him like that was Max Blumenthal. I fought to get that going, but rank and file is rank and file. I wasn't high enough, but what I said was, I think he could benefit you. When he went on that show with Shmuley, Rabbi Shmuley, is when the troubles began. And this was before October 7th. I remember this timeline. This was before October 7th. And it seemed like Shmuley was in his ear more than I could be in his ear. It seemed like that contingent was higher up in the rank and file. That's the best I could assess it. Shmuley ended up leaving after his beef with Candace Owens. It was just too destructive. But I remember talking to you. I don't know if you remember this, but I was like, we trying. There was that. So that left-leaning coalition, this was Dennis Kucinich was still there. We were very much advocating for Bobby to come across more nuance. We ain't got to say, I was like, look, man, you ain't got to say from the river to the sea. All right. That's what I would say. Palestine will be free. That's what I would say. But you can at least say, we don't want anybody's children dying. You could at least say a ceasefire is consistent with my stance as a pro-peace candidate. You could at least say, I am interested in having a conversation about what peace can look like in a long-term structured sense once the bombs start falling. I thought that was the most sensible thing. And when that wasn't said, a lot of the left-leaning contingent of Bobby Kennedy's campaign began to fall off. I was tempted to leave, but I realized something. If I do leave, who's speaking up for Palestine from within the campaign? You know what I mean? If all of us leave, then, there's nobody for that perspective. And so I said, Bobby gonna have to fire me, but I'm gonna keep speaking up. But I couldn't override the right-leaning contingent that was more focused on advocating the pro-Israel point of view. I couldn't overcome it. But that was the timeline. So you are right.
Yeah. So was the idea, like, for the campaign to bring together a right coalition and a left coalition and have them meet somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I think that we saw early on that there was pretty much, and I was able to articulate one of the videos because I was one of the faces of the campaign. There's a loud 15% on the right, loud 15% on the left, right? That's 30% of the population. And super woke, so super mega ain't gonna talk to each other, but there's this middle 70%, this practical, conscientious 70% who's willing to hear out the other side. I said, that's your people, Bobby. That's who we should go for. And around this time, to be fair, the Democrats were really obstructing him in, getting into the primaries and trying to have some kind of fair democratic process. At the time, Marianne Williamson was also trying to do the same thing. And that's when the slings and arrows from the Democrats really festered in Bobby's heart in a way that a lot of people don't realize. And it made him emotionally averse to them after a while and began to lean right. But at first, he wanted everybody. That has to be made clear. And the left had its role of blocking him from speaking to the left voters.
That's interesting. You brought up the Democratic primary, and that's where I'm going next.
Right.
The reason I left the Democratic Party is because of these types of games that they play, which is they decide who they're going to give a voice to, and they decide who they feel should be there. Those of us, a lot of us that are a part of this show, a lot of people in the audience, a lot of us came from the Bernie Sanders movement. So we are very familiar. Yeah. So, we're very familiar what the Democratic Party did to Bernie Sanders. So it wasn't surprising to me that they tried to shut out RFK. They tried to shut out Marianne Williamson, also Dean Phillips, who pretty much had the most sensible response, which was Joe Biden should not run again. He's too old. Like, it's just, very principled, which came into light. So I think the question that I have is, going into this process, was RFK aware of what happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016, how the Democratic Party rigged the primary against him? Was he aware of just how cold the Democratic Party can be to those candidates that they feel should not be front and center?
I think he knew intellectually, but he didn't really understand how severe the wall could be. And remember, his last name was supposed to be some kind of golden ticket. I mean, the man is royalty within that establishment. I mean, like, being around Bobby Kennedy is weird because you see that his facial features are on coins and buildings and sculptures. Like holy crap, it's very surreal, right? He's a Kennedy, man, and I think that in his mind that weighed something. I think that in Bobby's mind it was supposed to be like, look, you can do this those other folks, but they don't have my pedigree, right? At least that's what I think it was. He tried all the legal routes to do it. And if you ask me, that blocking of populist candidates from the populist left within the Democratic Party is the reason why they got their butts whooped. Flat out. That butt whooping been coming for a very, very long time. And now I think they should sit down and think about their life as Bobby is ascended to deconstruct the HHS. You know what I mean? So this is one of those things where I see it. I saw it with Bernie. Shoot, what they did to Bernie was the reason why I sat out in 2016. I sat it out. I was hardcore Bernie, bro, all the way, because I'm a millennial. I saw that his policies would be I would be the target group that they would affect the most. I don't think Bobby expected that. And it really hurt him. Like, on an emotional, personal level, it stung him. And we can talk more about that, but just getting to know the man, sleepless nights for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for that, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because those of us that were not a part of the campaign, I feel like we watched all this happen. I like it did, like, on a screen. We saw it either on YouTube or we saw it on CNN, and I'm like, oh, they're doing it again. And he was polling very well at that point in time. And even when he left the Democratic Party. So following this timeline, eventually, obviously, the Democratic Party made it almost impossible for RFK and for Marianne Williamson. So he decided to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And I think even more people got behind him at that point, and they said, okay, you tried to do it the right way, or what they perceived to be the right way. And now you're going to do it as an independent. You had no choice. What are you supposed to do? Right. And to some of us as an independent, we are looking for you to be independent from both of those systems. So we're looking to see that the candidate is not repeating some of the behaviors of the two-party system. The big one I think that jumped out to people is that RFK Jr. had Super PAC. RFK Jr. had, big money coming in. And I think that rubbed some people the wrong way. And then there was the issue of Nicole Shanahan. So, and I want to get your perspective about this. When RFK Jr. Selected Nicole Shanahan to be his running mate, there seemed to be a little bit of a split from RFK supporters. Some people thought it was a great idea, and some people said, oh, no, she's one of the Silicon Valley people. And so some people were not too sure about her. Do you think that Nicole Shanahan was the correct pick for his campaign? And how do you feel about the statement that some people had that she bought her way in?
You know, I had nothing but love for Nicole Shanahan. All my interactions with her were great. I saw her as extremely competent and capable. And while she may have some pluses and minuses other people may have liked, anybody else he would have chosen would have had a mixed bag as well. I didn't think that was the problem. I think that Nicole Shanahan would have been a powerful vice president. She has all the makings of somebody who is a very capable leader. I didn't have a problem with her. There were other things that I heard that, truth be told, after I had my first interaction with her, which was over the phone, I didn't really pay too much attention. Plus, I was knee deep in a whole bunch of other stuff by the time she came on. So we were trying to put out other fires. But Nicole Shanahan wasn't really a large issue within the campaign. From what I could see, she was pretty much beloved by everybody who was left within the campaign.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that one. And so even at that point, he was still traveling across the country. He was hosting rallies. From what I saw on video, he had pretty significant turnout. So
Big
people
rally.
were still very excited about him. He was still polling double digits as an independent candidate. And then as time went on, we heard RFK Jr. say that maybe he was interested in running with the Libertarian Party. And I think this also may rub some people the wrong way because we're like, but you're not a libertarian. It was kind of all over the place. And then we noticed also, it seemed like his campaign started to go in a different direction. And he continued to promise people that he would have ballot access on all 50 states, which I didn't believe from the jump because I know how hard it can be for an independent candidate for that to happen. But if he would have ran with the Libertarian Party, obviously that would have been doable. What do you think about that? That decision that RFK made when he went to the Libertarian Party convention and did ask for or did seek the nomination there, and the promise that he made about being on the ballot in all 50 states?
Ballot access was a huge battle within the campaign. It was almost all of the energy that was put into paying people and getting things done. Ballot access was the looming cloud over all of our heads. And, you know, that's something that I felt like RFK did strategically. He does have libertarian leaning viewpoints, obviously. There are things that he has in common with them. But ultimately, that was just about, from what I could see, making sure that he could consolidate enough small parties so that he could have access to all 50 states.
Okay. And I also know the Democratic Party, they continue to try to sue him off the ballot, just as they did Jill Stein and Cornel West and Claudia De La Cruz. They're notorious for doing that. Many of us at that point in time, we said, okay, all of these third party and independent candidates need to pick one person, and they all need to get behind that person. Why do you think that didn't happen?
Here's real Gaza. If I could be honest with you, it tore everybody's hearts open. If were somebody who had Zionist leanings, from your perspective, you saw the rise of anti-Semitism from places that you probably never thought that you would see it coming from on the left. At least that's how they interpreted it. If you're pro-Palestine, you see a genocide in 4K. Like, you see, it's on TikTok, it's on Instagram, and you cannot, for the life of you, fathom that somebody could fall on another side of this issue. And it tore the country apart. It tore our hearts apart. And I think that when you look at Cornel West's stance on it, when you look at Jill Stein's stance, Marianne Williams' stance, and then contrast to Bobby's stance on it, it was so hot. It was so right in front. It was so foreground. We couldn't consolidate like that. And let's say there was a coalition that could have, let's say, rallied around Cornel West. There was still such a large group of people around Bobby that it would have split it almost 50-50 if you really look at it from how the votes actually fell between Jill Stein and Bobby. So yeah, I think that's what did it. If that's just my perspective.
Yeah, I can see that being the issue. I can see that. So then we move forward, and there's the big announcement from RFK Jr. where he decided that he was going to sort of suspend his campaign, and he announced that if you were in a blue state or a red state and you wanted to support him, that they would try to stay on the ballot there and you could support him in those states. But ultimately, what ended up happening is that some of the swing states would not allow him to remove himself from the ballot, of course, because they thought that in its sense would hurt Donald Trump. Donald Trump ended up winning those states anyway, all of the swing states. But RFK Jr. announced that he was going to join with Donald Trump. And this is where I want to hear from you, because we had this conversation on Call-In after this was announced later on that week. And some of the people that called in said that they were RFK supporters and they were not happy about him joining with Donald Trump, that they had no intention to support Donald Trump, that they only wanted to support him. Do you think that was the right idea? And do you support that move that RFK made to suspend his campaign and to join with Donald Trump?
Well, it worked, didn't it? He's where he wanted to be, at least for that suspension. I feel like in principle, it was the absolute wrong move. And I told him that. I fought him tooth and nail. Behind the scenes, Bobby and I went back and forth for days about this. And one of the things I said was, you built this campaign from the personnel resource list of Children's Health Defense Fund, man. And you have created something that is essentially the hammer of Thor. The hammer of Thor can only be wielded by the worthy. Trump is not worthy. You have the good faith of people, that you are a good man, that you have some kind of moral compass, that your integrity can be found, that there is an ideological through line to the things that you stood for across your entire career. And Trump is not worthy of you. That's what I said. Trump is not worthy of you. He is somebody who is, I mean, as malignant narcissist, dictator as you can get from my vantage point. And Bobby's perspective was different. Because I told you, let's go back to those thorns that were in his heart. Joe Biden did not get at man's Secret Service until Donald Trump took a bullet to the ear. Joe Biden has a sculpture of Bobby Kennedy's father in his office. He look at it every single day. Robert Kennedy Sr.'s assassination is who justifies Secret Service protection for candidates on the campaign trail past a certain threshold, and Biden wouldn't give it to the man's son. Say what you want, but ain't none of us got a father named Robert Kennedy Sr. That specifically burned Bobby in a special way. Him being royalty of the Democratic Party, having been blocked in every single turn, made it feel like, okay, who is listening to me? Trump advocated Bobby gets Secret Service. After the whole world was shocked by him getting shot or grazed, that's when it happened. And then when he suspended his campaign, they took it back from him. Now, Gavin DeBecker's guys, those security team that he had, they're good, but they're pricey. They're bleeding him out, man. And with that, from Bobby's perspective, he had been betrayed by an institution who his family had helped build, and the only people listening to him were the folks on the right. He was losing money left and right. He should have had the dollars that he would have saved if they gave him Secret Service. And from his perspective, I don't agree with it, but I understand. I don't agree with it, but I understand. The reason why I don't agree with it is because y'all gonna see what Trump does. Y'all gonna see what he does. But I get where Bobby felt that way from his seat, the hottest seat that he could live in was his own. So I see it.
So he went to work with Trump's campaign, but at the same time, there were rumblings that he reached out to Kamala Harris's campaign as well, that he had reached out to both campaigns. And I wanted to hear from you if that's necessarily the case. And it's just that Kamala Harris's campaign was not interested.
She did once the Democrats knew that they could obstruct and silence the man, she followed suit. Once they knew that they could turn their back to a Kennedy, then Kamala, she turned her nose up at him. He wanted to talk about what it would look like if perhaps there was a way to create policy that served the agendas of their prospective coalitions in a way that could unite them. And he wasn't looking for a job with them necessarily, at least not to my understanding. But so he reached out to Kamala. But when Trump got shot, that resonated with Bobby in a special way. And I think we know why. That is something that is a special kind of wound for him. Like I told people, like they was like, why you at Bobby Kennedy's campaign? I was like, if your uncle and daddy been killed by under suspicious circumstances, you'd be a conspiracy theorist too. You wouldn't trust nothing, right? So they had a moment, man. Him and Trump really had a moment. I mean, called him up and they really chatted, man. They really talked and they really built. And perhaps if Kamala didn't have that wall up, there could have been a similar conversation on the other side. But from his perspective, these folks ain't listening and these folks are. And after a while, emotionally, it was very binary for him. I personally think Trump is going to be a disaster, but it was binary for Bobby.
So this sounds familiar because this reminds me of the conversation that Ice Cube had with Chris Cuomo on CNN. And I don't know if everybody remembers, but Ice Cube said that he reached out to Donald Trump and he reached out to Joe Biden to talk to both sides about his contract for Black America.
Right.
Ice Cube said that one side agreed to meet, which was Donald Trump, and the other side, which was Joe Biden, said, let's talk after I win, which apparently that never happened anyway. That talk never happened. So it kind of says something about that Biden-Harris administration that they just don't seem to be willing to meet with. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can't even say but it's just
they feel and exhibit their elitist ideals time and time again when somebody from the grassroots who might speak for the people, because there was a part of Bobby that definitely was populist, and they decided that they knew better. And now they got sat on their pockets. I hope that the donor class of the Democratic Party, I hope that everybody who is the kingmakers, the ones who feel like they know better than the people and the populists, really take a look in the mirror and examine themselves, because they earned this and they've been earning it for a long, long time. And so this is what they get. And of course, democracy will suffer. And of course, our precious, valuable institutions will suffer. Of course, people of color, minority folks will suffer. But it's not just that good men fail and it creates evil men winning. It's the fact that they'll do the wrong thing sometimes. It's not that they won't. It's not that they'll do nothing. It's that they'll fumble the ball, and they fumble the ball off of arrogance. And I hope that they are humbled by this, because there was a lot of red flags that the Democratic Party missed. And I think that this was primarily not Trump winning, but them losing.
That's an interesting point that you bring up there, because were you surprised on election night that Trump won every swing state?
I didn't think it was going to be like that. I thought she was going to get at least, Pennsylvania, because I knew some folks who was really, really working in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. I thought she was going to at least get that one. But the facts are the facts. When you look at who didn't show up, and they did a comparison between who showed up in 2020 for Biden and who did not show up in 2024 for Harris, and it was young people.
Yeah.
What do the young people care about? The young people care about Gaza. Young people care about being able to live. Everybody, I was like, look, man, it boils down to, can I afford groceries and are we going to World War III? You can stop that. You got to vote. Young people got the longest to be on this planet, man. They got the longest to be on this planet. Whatever's happening today, they will live with the fallout for the most extended period of time. Listen to them. And, Kamala Harris sat there and acted as if there's nothing that she could do to stop these babies from dying. sat there and acted like there was nothing she could do to stop innocent people from being mutilated by fire. Nothing you could do. If I say ceasefire, don't nothing happen. If Sabs says ceasefire, don't nothing happen. If Kamala Harris says ceasefire, the ship with the weapons stops in the middle of the ocean and comes back to our shoreline. And those bombs do not get delivered to Benjamin Netanyahu and the IDF, and people do not die. Period. That's what the young people cared about. And I told my good brother Robert, you need to be speaking at all these college campuses that are having these protests right now. I think your daddy would be there. I think your daddy would be there speaking up for the young folks, trying to get blood to stop being shed, innocent blood. And it was nothing to say, I believe, like hypothetically, you can say something like, I believe Israel has the right to exist, but so do the Palestinians. And October 7th was a horrific incident, but you do not repay blood with blood. I believe Israel's better than that. And until we have a ceasefire, we cannot stand on the moral high ground earned by us or something like that. Just say that. I wrote it out. Say something like that, right? And go to these kids and say, I care that the police are beating you up. Go to these children and say, I care that you feel like the world is unstable for you. You literally, and I promise to God, in December, we had to do fundraising. And there were so many people that we called that said, man, I love Bobby. I love her. Everything he talks about with the economy, everything he talks about justice. What's up with this Gaza situation? I can't donate. And that's what happened. And like I said, Bobby, see this? We already had this conversation. I ain't saying nothing to you that I have not said to him. And even to the point I was like, can we at least get the debate going with Max? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, can we have that? Like, just to show good faith to those who care deeply about this. People are crying. I was crying every day about that, yo. And I don't really cry like that. You know what I'm saying? Where I'm from, we don't cry like that. But I'm a father and I cry like that over this. You know what I'm saying? It ripped my heart out. And it ripped the heart of the kids out. And they said, if you would allow this to happen to me, I may not show up for you. Yep. And all them college towns in the swing states, them kids stay home.
This is true. Why didn't he go to any of the campus protests to talk to? Why didn't he even at least show up?
We tried to arrange it. My memory is a little sketchy around this one, but I remember something about we tried to arrange that. There was people within the campaign who was trying to bring in more balance to talk to the pro-Palestine side. But ultimately, there was kind of a fear that he would say even more things that would be upsetting to the kids if he had. And, to Bobby's credit, if he don't feel it, he won't say it. If he is not convinced of something, he will not say the thing. And we could not convince him of the things that we wanted said that we knew would bring the kids in and see him as the candidate that they needed. And so I think ultimately it was decided that that would not be the most productive route, simply because of how he actually felt about the issue. And, there was, like I said, myself included, very, very pro ceasefire within the campaign, but we didn't have the weight. We just didn't have the weight.
Speaking of weight, does he understand the weight of some of his words? For example, and I go back to the Breaking Point appearance. He was on Breaking Points, and one of the most famous quotes that a lot of us remember, he said that Palestinians are the most pampered people in the world.
He regretted
After
that.
interview, did he not have any understanding of what that said to people and what that meant?
Man, listen, you cannot be from the American royal family and call somebody else pampered. That just don't sound like you are self-aware. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where he definitely knew that he said the wrong thing. He definitely knew that he had stepped over the line with that. I think there were people advising him to say certain things that were from the extreme, even extreme for the Zionist perspective, that really cut him off from that group of folks who could have voted for him for that issue. You know what I mean? And with that being said, it was just, it was really, really difficult for him to come back from that. But I know that he wished he did not say that for a fact.
Well, now he has been given an appointment, and I want to get your take on this. This was announced earlier today, or actually late yesterday. It says that Donald Trump picks Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be his Department of Health and Human Services secretary. Now, some people in Congress are already, I'm sure you heard, are really pushing back on this. They do not want him in this position. But if I remember correctly, I believe this is what he would have wanted, being a part of that Trump campaign. How do you feel about that? Do you think that is a good position for him? And how do you feel about some of the congressmen and women that have spoken out that said, no, we can't have him in that position?
Listen, if all you know of Robert Kennedy is Mr. Brainworm, Mr. Anti-Vaxxer, Miss I put a dead bear in Central Park, if that's all you know, you don't want him you don't want him nowhere near that stuff. But if you know him as the lawyer, the guy who has sued these organizations up and down, if you know what Bobby has sacrificed to fight for the little guy his entire career, and if you understand that his knowledge of the conflict of interest within the regulatory bodies that are supposed to protect us and these drug manufacturers are the things that are actually killing Americans, you wouldn't actually want anybody else in that role. So if you think he's crazy brainworm man with the dead bear and the anti-vax, I understand why you're scared. But that's a straw man. That is a straw man, and that's a straw man that we were fighting the entire time. I get that you would be afraid if that's who you thought was in charge of that department. However, when you understand that the same regulatory failures that gave us the opioid crisis was the same regulatory environment that we mandated vaccines into, if you understand that Pfizer lost the Bextra lawsuit in 2009 to the $2 and $3 billion, and that they had no business having carte blanche with the vaccines that were mandated into our arms, and that's by anybody's common sense understanding, then you want somebody like Robert F. Kennedy to stop that from happening again, to strengthen the regulatory agencies and make sure that there was some accountability at the highest levels. That's what he really cares about. So once you see past the straw man, you understand that it's probably Trump's best pick. Everybody else is the clown car, but that's Trump's best pick per assignment so far.
It's interesting. Everybody's calling them clown car. So I have two more questions for you, Theo.
Sure.
So you said that the way the Democratic Party treated him really, I guess, got to him. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I saw Robert suffer at a personal level. When you talk about history and the Kennedy's place in it, it's really interesting. Like when you go to Hyannisport and you kick it with him in the actual Kennedy establishment, what we call historical figures were people around his Thanksgiving and Christmas table. See, it's different for him. And the party that they built, I mean, I'm talking about I didn't know how many generations of Kennedy have been involved in building the Democratic Party. Like since they came over from Ireland, right? They've been involved in the Democratic Party. So he was blood and guts Democrat. It wasn't just the fact that he felt betrayed by an organization. It's that the organization that his family helped build betrayed him. That's how he felt about it. And it was an entire, Bobby's 70 years old. It's an entire lifetime of allegiance to this organization that he is at conflict with now. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I can see that. Also, there were multiple interviews that, of course, CNN really, they really went to town with this one, reaching out to his family members and interviewing them. And of course, they were not in agreement with his run at all.
But you got to remember, the Kennedy family is huge. Every time, if you went to a real event with him, there's Kennedys all around. Shrivers all around, and it's them because they all got that same face. They all got that same historic face. Even the kids got that face. So there was Kennedys all around. That's just a big family.
Yeah, that's true. But they would pick out the ones that they knew didn't agree with it. But it's funny because Biden ended up dropping out anyway. So that's a whole nother conversation. But the last question I had for you is, if there was anything that you could do differently for this campaign, looking back on things, what would you have done differently?
I would have done what I intended to do. I came up with a strategy called sweep the leg. I laid this out to him in Hyannisport. I said, the leg that the Democratic Party stands on is the black vote. I can tell you exactly what they're talking about. The black vote is talking about reparations. The black vote is talking about being able to feed their kids. They want something tangible and they want it now, and they're not going to wait. They have saved the Democratic Party many times, and now they're looking for issues that are specific to them. I said, you can sweep the leg. If you go on urban media right now, so I was trying to get him like literally all over World Star. I got him on Charlemagne the Guy. We got him, some of my team booked him on Vlad TV. You know what I'm saying? Angela Stan King joined. Shout out to Angela. You know what I'm saying? So there was a lot of people that was trying to get him in front of black voters. I wrote the plan, targeted community repair. And what my language was, is that a community that's targeted for destruction must be targeted for repair. It's like if you have a broken bone, the body is better when that bone is healed, but you must target that bone to heal it. So targeted community repair was one of them things that became a lightning rod. But I still think that they were too concerned about pissing off the right and not concerned enough about pissing off black voters. The next thing is when Israel-Palestine came, I get the knee-jerk reaction to say what he said at the beginning of the conflict. But I truly believe if by November of last year, Bobby had been the ceasefire candidate and stood 10 toes down on that, he'd be the president of the United States. And the reason is he wasn't running against 1992 Bill Clinton. He wasn't running against 1980 Ronald Reagan and 2008 Barack Obama. He was running against two duds, two of the least popular presidential candidates ever. The man already got the last name. If he had captured that wind, number one, he'd have captured the votes, and number two, he'd have captured that money. When we was doing the fundraising calls, so many people said that Israel-Gaza was the deal breaker. I fully believe that Kamala Harris not putting distance between herself and Joe Biden. She was asked flat out, how will you be different from Joe Biden? She said, I ain't going to be different from Joe Biden. The kids heard that. Dearborn, Michigan heard that. Everybody who cares about, you know what I'm saying, our link between Black America and Palestinians, the Ta-Nehisi Coates gang, they heard that. And so that was the albatross that weighed both of them down. And I believe that if Bobby would have captured that wind, he'd have rode it right to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's my honest belief. And I think that history will prove us right.
Theo, thank you so much. What are you up to now? If you want to let people know where they can follow you.
Man, listen, I'm at Theo E.J. Wilson Instagram. And right now, I'm working in the climate space. I found a great passion figuring out how to restore wetlands and ocean pastures. I'm really obsessed right now. I mean, there's something that me and Bobby got in common. I'm from an environmentally polluted neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? I grew up near where that toxic waste was and that dog food factory, and we had jet fuel import on us because we was near the airport. That's where my hood is from. So I'm working in the environmental space right now. I've just got a second wind about that. And stay writing because I'm a poet and a songwriter. So that's where my creative juices are flowing, and that's where a lot of opportunities are going. You know what I mean?
Awesome. Theo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sabby Sabs.
Bye. All right, guys, that was Theo Wilson. Again, he is RFK Jr.'s former policy advisor. I hope you learned a lot from Theo tonight. I know some of you had a lot of questions about RFK's campaign, like what happened, etc. So I think it was great to hear from him. Hopefully that did answer some of your questions that you had. But yeah, We have a pretty packed show tonight. I do have other news stories I want to cover as well. First and foremost, the theme of tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is games people play. The little chalkboard there behind me. I think I wrote games a little too big, but games people play. That's what tonight's news stories are all about. So we'll get into all of that, ladies and gentlemen. Let's first go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. Everybody ready for the weekend? Are you ready? I'm ready. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you guys so much. You know what? You guys are thirsty in the chat. I see it all. I see these comments. You guys are thirsty in the chat. I see you, Saul Good. That dude is really attractive. Good luck to that man. I see all of you guys. Okay. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. Don't forget about the Sabsters. Thank you so much, guys. We also have Sabbies, of course. They're holding down the sandwich there. And we also have, I need to fix that space there. We also have members. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate all of you here. And I want to give a shout out to a new, I'm not looking at the chat no more. I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Steve McLaughlin. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you guys. All of their names are scrolling across the bottom of the screen there. Thank you so much for your support. So let's go to a couple of comments and then we'll get into the other stories. Shout out to Samad, says, Khanna, free Palestine. What's up, Sabby? Thank you for all you do. Happy weekend, fam. May we all resist these fascist neocons together. Thank you so much. And shout out to Samad for being a member for 2 months. Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Looks like Roe gearing up for 2028. No, Roe, no one wants you. I was thinking the same thing. I can't wait till we get to that story. Don't forget to answer that poll if you haven't had a chance to do so, guys. What do you think about Khanna? This will be interesting. Shout out to Cooper, who is now a Sabby member. Give Cooper a big whoop, whoop. And holy smokes, thank you so much for the super sticker, Chief Rocka. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Thank you. Pitchforks are coming. The Green Party is still organizing and growing this movement, unlike any of the others, only around at election time for donations. This is true. If you guys don't already, make sure you follow Jill Stein on Twitter, or you can see this on the Green Party website. She has released a video about next steps. So I think you guys need to check that out. Thank you, Blunts and Otters. Was Aaron Rodgers really considered for VP? Shoot. I should have asked that question. Thank you. Sorry I didn't see this earlier. Thank you. Palestine has a right to defend against occupation. Sabby, you are a force to be reckoned with. Consistently excellent quality content. Major fan of your incredible work. Thank you and welcome. And thank you, Michael. RFK Jr. said no to reparations. Why? I should have talked about that too. I am so sorry. So sorry, Michael. Well, he said yes to reparations, but not cash reparations. And yeah, that is something that definitely should have changed, right? Definitely should have changed. Okay, if you're just joining and you haven't done so, go ahead and do me a favor, ladies and gentlemen, and smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Like a damn Care Bear. All right. What else are we discussing tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail. Interesting stories. Again, tonight's theme is games people play. And here are the players. Tonight, we are discussing Candace Owens' Trump censorship. Oh, will this be a test for Candace Owens? We are going to see. We will follow this story. We're also going to discuss Khanna calls out Kamala. Oh, yes, everybody has things to say now. Everybody's got something to say. But Khanna has gone on to multiple shows to talk about this, not just one. Oh, my God. Is Khanna getting ready for 2028? Of course, Theo Wilson was just here to discuss what happened with RFK Jr.'s campaign. So he was RFK's advisor. We're also going to discuss Antony Blinken is busted, calling out people tonight. That's right, Antony. We're calling you out tonight. And last but not least, Alan Lichtman breaks his silence. Alan Lichtman, he is the professor that was called the Nostradamus of presidential elections. And Alan Lichtman finally lost. He is breaking his silence. And even breaking his silence, he's still not admitting to some things. So we're going to debunk some of the things that he says. It's crazy. I'm telling you, these are the games that people play. Let me make sure I think I just wrote games too big, guys. Did I write games? Can you see a little bit better now? Okay, there it is. Is that better? There we go. Now you can see it. Games people play. All right, let's go ahead and get into our first news story. Ladies and gentlemen, you may or may not remember this, but about a month ago, Antony Blinken and Joe Biden told everyone that Israel had 30 days to allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. And if they did not do that within 30 days, that Israel was going to, or the U.S. was going to withhold arms from Israel. At that time, I told you I didn't believe that. I thought they were buying time. I also thought they were trying to help out Kamala Harris with this election as well, to make it look like they're trying to do something, but they're really not. And I was right. Listen to this. My comrade Nick, he broke this down. We are calling out Antony Blinken tonight. First up on deck, Antony Blinken. Go for it, Nick.
The Biden administration will continue to send arms and munitions to the genocidal state of Israel, even though they know that Israel is blocking aid and using starvation as a tool of war. Last month, the Biden administration gave Israel 30 days to allow aid to continue to flow into northern Gaza.
But correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that what you guys said a month ago?
That is what we said a month ago, and that is why we laid out.
They have not yet met them because you say that they have taken some steps, but more needs to be made. In other words, they have not met the criteria by the deadline. You are giving them a pass. Is that I don't understand. There's no other way to look at it.
No, I don't think that is true. That letter was specific about some specific areas where we wanted to see them take some additional steps.
Have you seen those steps?
We have seen some of those steps being taken. Yes, yes.
It didn't say some. It said all, right?
Matt, the point is...
This was such an obvious election gimmick designed to get people critical of the Democratic Party because of their genocide and criminal behavior into voting for Kamala Harris at the last second. Thank God these evil scumbags lost. What makes this even more deplorable is that Biden sending arms and munitions to Israel when they know they are committing war crimes like using starvation as a tool of war is against not only international law, but U.S. law. Meanwhile, the Biden administration smears the American people as terrorists because they protest them in their criminal behavior. And because Joe Biden allowed Israel to block aid for so long, we are now witnessing a massive famine in northern Gaza. Never forget, the people who actually want to uphold the rule of law, the people who actually want to hold the terrorists responsible, are the pro-Palestinian protesters who continue to resist the Zionist regime.
That's right. Shout out to Nick there and Hotspot. Excellent video. But this is exactly what we predicted would happen, that they were not serious about that. They were never going to withhold any type of arms from Israel. Let's be real about that. And that was just them buying time and hoping that that would help them with the presidential election. I mean, they timed it down from like the very day, right? So just right after the election would end. Oh, if you vote for Kamala, this could happen, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And all of this is being exposed. And I know some of you are probably wondering, well, Sabs, why are you talking about this again? Because I want to talk about this as much as possible before January 2025. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are still in office right now. And there are a number of liberals that are trolling Palestinian Americans Arab Americans saying, oh, ha, 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 you had a protest vote. Just wait till Trump gets in there. I just want to remind everybody what's happening right now under the Biden-Harris administration. They still have, a month and a half left, and they are still wreaking havoc, and people need to see it. Now, Antony Blinken recently gave a speech about this. Shout out to Jonta Reporter for this. Follow them if you don't, by the way. Jonta Ka Reporter, they're really good. Listen to the speech Antony Blinken just gave about Israel.
A straight face.
On the Middle East and on Gaza. Let me be very clear about both the intent and the effect of the letter that Secretary Austin and I sent a month ago to our Israeli counterparts. The intent was to inject a sense of urgency with Israel to take necessary steps to address the dire humanitarian situation of children, women, and men in Gaza. The effect has been that of the 15 steps that we urged action on, Israel has taken action, either in implementing or being in the process of implementing 12 of the 15 steps.
That's a lie. We're calling out the first lie. So the intent, and I want to correct him, the intent was not to put pressure on Israel, okay? Because you guys have supposedly been putting pressure on Israel this entire time, which I think we know is BS. The intent was to get people to come out and vote for the Democratic Party. That was the intent. They knew Gaza was a real issue for a lot of people. Theo said it earlier. A lot of young people did not show up because of Gaza. So you can't sit here and try to sell us these lies. You cannot sit here and sell this to us. So people have to understand Antony Blinken is a paid liar. Secretary of State. Come January, Marco Rubio is going to be in this position. He's the one I think that Congress will not vote against. So we're going to go ahead and claim him for that position. And you're going to hear lies from him too, especially about this particular issue. It is Antony Blinken's job to convince you, the American people, that the U.S. government is doing everything in their power to get aid to Gazans, to make sure that as many civilians as possible are protected. Now, I'm going to show you a video after the speech to show you Antony Blinken is lying to you. This is what he does. He's a paid liar. And for whatever reason, he seems to preside over all these different wars. This ain't his first rodeo. He's been in DC before. He was involved with Afghanistan. So that's what these people are paid to do. Do not mistake the expression on his face. Do not mistake his, I guess, somewhat caring demeanor. He is acting. This guy is an actor, okay? So he's paid to act, and that is what he is doing. So don't fall for it.
There are three big issues that still need to be addressed that come from the letter. First, making sure that when Israel engages in an operation and people have been evacuated from an area, that once that operation is done, it rescind the evacuation order so that people can return. And we can start to take down some of this horrific overcrowding that we're seeing in parts of Gaza where people have been sent to. So that's one. Second, we want to see, along with the humanitarian assistance that's getting in, commercial trucks getting in with commercial goods. This is vital because so many of the things that the commercial truckers bring in, including things like fruits and vegetables, are absolutely essential to the balanced nutrition for people in Gaza.
You weren't thinking about balanced nutrition when Netanyahu told you that they didn't want to allow the aid to come in. I'm thinking about the ones who do survive. What kind of diseases, what kind of illnesses are they going to have to deal with after all this is said and done? I mean, it's just the fact that he's like, we want them to allow the aid. He is admitting to your face that they know that Israel is not allowing the aid to get in. Now, there's something called the Leahy Act. And from what I understand from this, it is actually illegal for our country to send arms to another country if they're starving the people. And I would really press every single politician who is not in favor of what Israel is doing to push that. I don't want to hear we're working tirelessly for a ceasefire. No, they're not. They never were. They've been lying to you. That was just to buy time. It's like someone that's been staying at your house for like a year or so, and they tell you they've been looking for a job, and you don't see them fill out no applications. You ain't see them going to no interviews, and they've been there for a year or two, and they still say they still looking. We got to put 2 and 2 together. That is buying time. This administration, I want it to be remembered for one thing: genocide. That's what I want you to remember from the Biden-Harris administration. Genocide. Don't come talk to me about the Infrastructure Act, whatever. None of that matters. The child tax credit, which ended early, none of those things matter anymore. You are now known for genocide. And that includes Antony Blinken, that includes Kamala Harris, and that includes Joe Biden.
In turn, is critical to making sure they have the immunities they need to fight off disease. And that's not something normally the humanitarians do. This comes in through commercial means. The challenge there, in terms of restoring commercial trucking, has been a huge problem of lawlessness and looting inside of Gaza that needs to be addressed, and that we're working on finding a solution to. That right now there are 900 trucks that are inside of Gaza at Kerem Shalom, but backed up. They can't be distributed because of this looting and because of the criminality. So it's imperative that that be addressed. Israel has...
Pause. No, it can't be distributed because Israel is not allowing the food and the aid to come in. Second, to the point about looting, about people in Gaza looting trucks, how can you call it looting when Israel has attacked every restaurant, any type of business that would distribute food? How can you call it looting when the people have no food? Are you kidding me? So it's not the Palestinian people that are looting the trucks. They keep telling you this. They keep saying it's Hamas and and all that kind of stuff. In reference to the IDF, if he's trying to talk about the IDF looting, no, just call it what it is. They are blocking aid. And they've known this and they can stop it, but they don't want to. Antony Blinken is in on it. He's been in on it from day one. They all have been pro-Israel. They have made it very clear to you that an Israeli life is more important than a Palestinian life. So much to the point that people had to make a song about this. You know, how do you feel? What kind of administration? And you let me know if there's been other songs made. But Macklemore has literally made 2 songs about this administration committing genocide. Hit songs too, by the way. All the proceeds are going to UNRWA for those songs. I mean, you got to be some kind of embarrassed. I don't understand how these people walk around in DC with their heads up. I don't understand it at all.
Responsibilities to do that. We're also working with Egypt. And then, in my judgment, maybe most significantly, we need to see real and extended pauses in large areas of Gaza, pauses in any fighting, in any combat, so that the assistance can effectively get to people who need it.
So here's another trap, another trick that people are falling for, right? When Antony Blinken tells you he needs to see real pauses so that the aid can get in. So they have been saying this for months. This is not new. This is another trick, right? So if you really want there to be pauses, you wouldn't continue to send them weapons.
There are huge challenges in that regard, but we've also seen real solutions. The polio vaccination campaign was the one thing that's been very successful in Gaza. Hundreds of thousands of children got polio vaccines. But critical to success in doing that was having extended pauses for days, not simply hours, as is the case right now, to make sure that everyone bringing assistance in has the ability to bring it in and to distribute it and to have space to do that. So we will be working on this intensely in the days ahead. I'll be discussing this further with President Biden. And the responsibility that Israel has in terms of making sure that assistance to the best of its ability can get to people who need it is an ongoing responsibility. And I believe that the steps that it's taken over the last weeks to address what we had in our letter, those steps would not have been taken absent the letter. But it's also critical, as the letter made clear, that not only are these steps taken, but they need to be fully implemented and they need to be sustained if they're going to have effect. Yes, the last month has been terrible for people. The letter went out already. We were into October. We're starting to see, as I said, implementation of most of the steps that we've laid out. It will take some time for them to have an effect. And again, they have to be fully implemented. They have to be sustained. But even with that, I think it's essential that we see things like more extended pauses. Now, the hard bottom line truth is also this.
Here we go.
Even with all of these steps, the situation is so difficult and so dramatic that to fully redress it, to fully answer the needs of people, the best way to do that is to end the war. And from my perspective, what we've seen is this. Israel, by the standards it set itself, has accomplished the goals that it set for itself, the strategic goals it set for itself. It was rightly determined to make sure, to the best of its ability, that October 7th could never happen again. And to do that, it said that it needed to dismantle the military organization of Hamas and to get the leadership that was responsible for October 7th.
Let me pause here. Pay attention to the vocabulary that is using. Number one, Hamas is not a military. Gaza doesn't have a military. Hamas is a resistance group. So I want to push back on that. And then two, you guys got to know, it's the same script every time. That Israel has a right to defend itself. Same script every time. So he says that those steps have been taken. Let's see what those steps look like. Okay. Because I'm going to show you about these games that people play. And right now that player is Antony Blinken. These are the steps that he's talking about. This is recent. Look at this.
The airstrikes come without warning. For some, it's enough. Time to leave again. The constant move to the promise of safety, which doesn't exist. They mostly walk in silence. Women and children watched by Israeli tanks and struggling under the weight of whatever belongings they can carry. Some can barely face it. They've lost the energy to keep fleeing a war that has no front line. In the panic to escape, these children have lost their mother. A sleeping baby has also been separated from her family.
This is what people need to see. I know it's hard to see it. But when you see that little girl say, Mom, like crying, where's her mom? Where's her mom? Could you imagine living like this? They've been living this way for a year. So Antony Blinken says, the last month has been rough. No, the last year has been rough, Antony. It's been a year. He wants you to believe that this is a blip. It's just a blip on the map. And it was just this past October. It's been a whole year. These people have been living this way. Kids are orphaned. If you're watching and you're a parent, how would you feel if it's your children? Forget about what color they are right now. Forget about what country they're in. Imagine if it was your child. How would you feel? Sometimes we got to do that. Sometimes we got to tell people, don't think about what color they are. Don't think about what language they speak. Don't think about what country they're in. Pretend it's your kids without their mother. This is what our government has been funding. This is what our government has been supporting. I don't know how many kids are orphaned in Gaza right now. But now other parents, other adults have taken these kids in. For those who do survive this, what is their life going to be like? What is their future going to be like? Do you think that little girl who was crying, saying, Mama, where's Mama? Do you think that little girl, when she gets older, you think she's going to forget about this? You cannot eliminate Hamas because it's an ideology. The U.S. government seems to think that this is just a group that you get rid of. The ideology remains because of what is happening right now. These kids remember. They don't forget. So even if Israel were to eliminate everyone that is a part of Hamas, you have a new generation of Hamas with the people and that's why they want to destroy them all. That's why they want the kids gone, because they don't want them there, because they'll remember. And there is that fear from Israel that maybe they may rise up one day. You think these people will never forget what happened to them? Hell, people don't forget losing their damn mom. People don't forget being orphaned. People don't forget bombs dropping over their head at night. People don't forget starving.
This girl was with her grandmother, an elderly lady. Her grandmother dropped her. We don't know who she is. All we know is how to help each other. So we are waiting here in hopes that her parents will come and take her.
Very sad. Very sad. And Anthony Blinken, he wants you to believe that Israel is taking the steps that they laid out for them. This is what he just told you. They're taking the steps that we sent in that letter. The video I just showed you is recent. Does it look like they're taking steps to you? That was supposed to be a safe zone. The reality is there are no safe zones in Gaza. Nowhere safe. Anthony Blinken is a murderer. Kamala Harris is a murderer. Joe Biden is a murderer. This administration, they are murderers. They are killing children. And I can't believe that this is even a question for all the liberals who pointed their fingers at people like me and said, I hope your Jill Stein protest vote was worth it because Trump won. I hope those of you that stayed at home are happy because Donald Trump won. Take that same attitude and throw it towards the Biden administration. I ain't got time for it. Take that same attitude and throw it towards your friend, towards the Democratic Party. Take that same attitude and throw that back towards the people who have allowed this to happen for over a year. I'm not on your team. You on the Dallas Cowboys, I'm on the Patriots. I'm not on your team. People have to understand that. If you can't sit up there and hold this administration accountable, you are in a cult. And no shade to those of y'all that like the Cowboys, but I'm just calling it like I see it. You know, sometimes some of you kind of be like, you know, we them boys, Cowboys going to Super Bowl this year. I hear that every year. We can never forget what this administration has done. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Dwayne said, F the Cowboys. Oh, Mitch says Cowboy fans have been upset a long time. Yeah. Cowboy fans are not happy, but I understand. Let's go to some of the comments. Thank you, Hussein. Do you think being Arab holds a great stigma in America nowadays? Hussein, I think it's been that way since 9/11. Because I remember a lot of Islamophobia after 9/11. Thank you for the super sticker, Vilma. Thank you, Hussein. God bless the people of Gaza. It is sick how people are making fun of these people being crucified. As a Lebanese American, I lost respect for the USA. Honey, I'm not Lebanese. I'm not Arab American. I'm not Muslim American, but I lost respect for this country a long time ago. Long time ago. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Black Progress Network. Thank you, baby Ethernet. Israel is funding the looters. Shocker. And thank you for this one. Just stop providing the bombs and weapons. Goofy clown. That's right. Thank you, Hussein. I can never look at the U.S. the same ever again. This past year proved to me that Arabs are not respected, but call us white on government forms. Sad. Yeah. And I don't know if it was that way in this country post 9/11, but I do know after 9/11, I saw it heavily. Thank you, Chris. Biden was instrumental in UNRWA being cut and then Israel's own government classifying them as terrorists. He did this all with an old white man smile. Mad. He's a sneaky little something. Shout out to Cooper. He gifted 5 Sabs memberships. Thank you, Cooper. And congrats to whoever received those. Thank you, Ace. May God forgive us for our shortcomings. We have failed Gaza. The U.S. should never speak of human rights ever again. Gaza is our Holocaust. Thank you, Fuzzy Balls. All right. Mine's not going there. Thank you, Fuzzy Balls. After Democratic leadership courted Liz and Dick Cheney and rolled them out like it was no big deal, I'm not sure how anyone can be a proud Democrat. Yeah, I feel you. And another gift, shout out to Joanne Keene, who also, she gifted 10 Sabs memberships. So thank you and congrats to those who received it. We're going to our next story here about Ro Khanna. And first and foremost, I do want to make sure, if you haven't had a chance to do so, answer that poll question. There's a poll that's pinned to the top of the chat. So make sure you answer that because, yeah, that'll be important later. Based. Okay. Let's go ahead and get to the next story, shall we? Hey. Ro Khanna. You know, Ro Khanna is one of those politicians that he just kind of pops up every now and then on news programs just to remind you, hey, I'm still here and I'm a Democrat, but I may not be as bad as these other guys. So let me come throw them under the bus for a little bit and just to remind you how I'm not like them. And it always makes me wonder, is Ro Khanna trying to run for president for 2028? Maybe he could be considering it, especially after this conversation here. So Ro Khanna was interviewed at Capitol Hill. There's 2 conversations with him. They're asking Ro Khanna here about what went wrong with Kamala Harris's campaign. Guys, you got to hear this. Ro is ready to row the boat.
Congressman, I want to read to you something that was published in USA Today, an op-ed from a longtime Democratic consultant named Chris Kofinas. He writes as follows. On every level, meaning the election, it was a historic defeat that has created a new bloc of voters who will affect every future election, the hidden Trump Democrat. These voters, I go on to quote directly, grew tired of being lectured at by a cadre of political, social, cultural, and establishment elites who minimized or outright ignored the serious economic pain they felt over inflation or the grave concerns they felt over illegal immigration. How much, if at all, do you agree with that sentiment?
I agree with the second half, that we have to acknowledge that for the past 50 years, people have been shafted in this country, that working class and middle class folks are struggling economically. Their kids may not be able to buy a house or a car. Jobs and factories have gone offshore, and an economic and political system has failed them. And we failed to articulate that, and so people didn't feel seen or heard. And then we can talk about what the solutions are. In terms of...
Pause. Ro Khanna says that people didn't feel seen or heard. Again, he's another Democrat that has come forward to admit recently that Kamala Harris's campaign didn't have the right strategy or they didn't focus on the issues that most Americans identify with. But Ro Khanna was silent about this during Kamala Harris's campaign. And actually, when Biden was still in this race for re-election, Ro Khanna was interviewed multiple times and he said, I think that Biden's done a great job. I think we just need to get the messaging out there. Now that everything has fallen apart and the Democratic Party is witnessing a slow, painful death, now Ro has balls. And now Ro Khanna wants to come forward and say, listen, this campaign didn't speak to those issues. So what I'm seeing that is happening here is that other politicians who may have been considering running for president, or maybe Ro Khanna's considering running for Senate, who knows, they kind of see this as their shining moment to put their self out there and to show how they are different, or they may feel they're different than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Oh man, Biden and Kamala really screwed up. Now's my moment. Now's my time. Let me go ahead and show everybody, yeah, they messed up. But you know what? I might be running in 2028, so check me out. You know, of course, he didn't say that part just yet, but I feel like it's leaning that way, that it's leaning in that direction.
Are the Democrats permanently losing voters? I mean, this happens after every election. It's like in a football season. A team wins by 40 points and suddenly they're going to the Super Bowl. Next game, they lose and they're out of contention. So the pendulum swings back and forth in American politics. I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned about the Democrats developing a strong economic message and feeling people's pain. And I also think we need to be respectful and humble, even where we have opinions that we may disagree, not lecture people about our views.
How about?
That part right there. Don't lecture people about our views, even with those where we may disagree with. What is happening, folks? You think Ro Khanna is realizing that populism actually is, appealing across the country? Remember, Ro Khanna worked with the Bernie campaign in 2020. So Bernie, he knows. He knows that there are certain issues that are popular around the country. Bernie Sanders had the majority of the independent support for independent voters. So Ro Khanna knows this. He knows what is a winning message when he hears it. So he knew better than to sit there and lie during other interviews when Biden was still in this race and say he was doing a good job, and to support and say, yeah, Kamala's doing great. No, he knew these people weren't going great. He knew that wasn't a winning message. He knew this wasn't a winning campaign. What's wrong? Sabrina, I just got a notification on my phone that RFK just dropped a bombshell and people in Washington are paying. I'll have to look that up. But let me go ahead and get back to the video.
This description, cadre of political, social, and cultural elites.
Well, look, I think we have a cadre of political operatives who are out of touch with ordinary communities. The people who were thought that having Beyonce and Bruce Springsteen, I love Bruce Springsteen, and Katy Perry doing concerts was somehow more important than having people who had been laid off because of plant closures talking at political rallies. I mean, I don't understand what they thought they were doing with.
I don't understand what they thought that they were doing either. It was really out of touch to have all those celebrities at these rallies in cities, especially Detroit. Are you kidding me? A city that has closed over 40 something schools, a city where people are really struggling economically. There's not a lot of jobs that are left in Detroit. I know there's been work to try to revitalize Detroit, but the reality is, as it stands right now, that was a tone deaf message. Why are you bringing all these celebrities to Detroit where people are struggling to make it, right? So I agree with him. And I told you guys the celebrification of Kamala Harris's campaign was tone deaf, and it doesn't resonate with a lot of working class voters or with voters that are poor. It just really doesn't. But you should have said that back then, Ro.
Those with the events they organize. So I do think there needs to be a house cleaning of the political operative class. I think we need to listen more to people like Chris Deluzio and Marie Perez and folks like Jared Golden, even. I mean, some from all parts of the party, progressive, centrist, it doesn't matter, but they're connected to communities, actual communities, meeting actual voters. That's what I think we need.
So does everybody see what's happening now? Now that I guess the message has been sent that it's okay to say that the Democratic Party needs to clean house. now more politicians are also echoing that statement. Like now Ro Khanna is echoing that statement. We've heard other people say it as well past couple of days. Yeah, you guys need to change leadership. Nancy Pelosi, by the way, just announced that she is running for re-election. Nancy Pelosi needs to retire. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, these people need to retire. Why are you still there? This is why we need term limits in Congress. Why are you still there? You're over retirement age. Step aside and let somebody else take those seats. You guys are holding that party back. That and the donors. It's the donors holding the Democratic Party back, and it's the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumer. Dianne Feinstein was wheeled into Congress incoherent, not in her right mind, and they were telling her how to vote on legislation. Isn't that sad? They kept that woman there for that long. These people need to retire. So I agree with him about that.
You traveled to New Hampshire during the primaries. You went to Michigan, the Dearborn and Detroit areas. You have been this year, this election year, close to some of these fractured components of the Democratic coalition. Did election night genuinely surprise you, Congressman?
It didn't surprise me that much. The magnitude of the defeat surprised me. I have to give you credit, Garrett. When I was seeing all these polls up on Michigan, you were the one in your reporting saying, no, this thing is much closer than it appears, weeks before the pundits caught up. And that was certainly my experience going to Michigan. I mean, the war was a huge issue. The economy was a huge issue. People just weren't feeling that they were part of the middle class. They still felt that they were falling behind.
See this? U.S.-Israel support too strong. See this? Vote for president. U.S.-Israel support too strong. 62% Harris, 37% Donald Trump. This was Michigan. So do you see? You heard what Ro Khanna said? That obviously Gaza was an issue. And Kamala Harris's campaign may not want to admit this. And also corporate media may not want to admit this. But the numbers don't lie.
And in New Hampshire, I think that there was a mistake in not campaigning there. And that probably resulted in the races being closer than people expected.
And what, if you were to synthesize it into a sentence, would you say is the most important priority for Democrats coming out of this election?
A real substantive vision on the economy that recognizes that while districts like mine are thriving, a lot of the country has fallen behind and isn't succeeding in a modern economy.
The economy. The economy. Everybody knows this. Everyone gets it. And yet they thought it was a good idea to let's focus primarily on Roe v. Wade. He didn't just stop there. He also went on to CNN to talk to Wolf Blitzer. So I'm telling you, he's on a podcast circuit. So again, this is part of the games that people play, right? So Ro Khanna was saying none of this during Kamala's campaign or during Biden's campaign. He was cheerleading them. He was praising them, saying they're doing such a great job. And now that he's got the approval that it's okay to bash the campaign publicly, now he's on his podcast tour. So they all got the PR announcement.
Have you? I know you call it a colossal defeat for Democrats and say there needs to be what you call a cleaning of the House. What exactly are you calling for?
Well, the political class, the governing consultant class, the political operative class, I think they need to go, make way for new people. I mean, we spent $1 billion. We had concerts all over the country, and yet people can't afford a house. They can't afford a car. We were not speaking to the economic needs of a lot of working and middle class Americans. And there needs to be a much more bottom up approach. I think we should spend 6 months outside Washington, going to communities, listening to voters in factory towns in rural America, and really then building up a positive agenda. But we need to be honest that it was a failure in terms of the campaign.
Pause here for a second. So notice what he said there. We need to spend time outside of DC because a lot of them don't. It's just a reality. A lot of them don't spend time outside of DC. This is right. Into communities, working class communities, rural communities. Now he said rural, but I want to also add urban communities as well. It's not just about rural America. It's also about urban America too. Yeah, they do need to spend time in those communities and don't just show up there because you're looking for a vote. And that's a big part of the problem with the Democratic Party. One thing I will say is this: Republicans organize. Republican Party is organized. Now, you can talk about how if you agree with the issues that they organize around, that's a separate thing. But they tend to be a little bit more organized. Whereas like the Democratic Party, the only time you see them is when it's time for them to get your vote again. And many of you are probably familiar with this. I've seen it a number of times. Raise your hand if someone from the Democratic Party has knocked on your door. Besides, vote for this person. I'm not talking about canvassing. Do you see these people? Do you see any of these politicians in your neighborhood just out and about or trying to organize or do community building? Or do they only show up when they need a vote? That's a big part of the problem.
It was a real failure indeed. In a new interview, as I'm sure you know by now, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suggests President Biden should have withdrawn from the race sooner to allow for a competitive primary to take place. Could this have helped Democrats? What do you think?
I think that's Monday morning quarterbacking. I mean, look, people didn't like how that whole thing went down. Actors and party elites trying to engineer a process. But 107 days with a good campaign and a strong economic message could have won. I mean, we were up in the polls end of August. So now.
Did you hear this? This is important. So for the people who say that Kamala Harris didn't have enough time, Khanna is saying that she did. Khanna is saying like a good campaign could have won. So everybody's throwing Biden under the bus now. Everybody's like, yeah, Biden, he could have dropped out sooner or whatever, but he still feels like Kamala Harris still could have won, that she had enough time. Interesting.
I would say, there was not enough time. I don't think that's the root cause. The root cause is we simply did not have a strong economic message to convince working and middle-class Americans that we were on their side. And we weren't able to convince people that on cultural issues, you could reasonably disagree without shaming them or making them feel isolated. So,
the message. So the message has reached them, right? The message has reached Democrat politicians that it probably wasn't a good idea to call Trump supporters garbage and call people all these names and stuff like that. Even those who weren't supporting Trump, and maybe they just were undecided at that point and they didn't know what they were going to do. And then they see all that crazy rhetoric. For some, that may have made them say, okay, well, I don't want to be supporting your party then, if that's how you're going to talk to people. MSNBC calling voters uneducated. They kill me with this, right? Joe Scarborough saying, who raised these people? Like, really? Very classist, elitist. It's a turnoff.
We need to have introspection as a Democratic Party, rebuild, have a new generation of leaders. And I think that the establishment needs to make way. There are a lot of talented people in their 40s and 50s across America, and a lot of new political operatives who now need to lead the Democratic Party.
And you make an important point. They raised what the Democrats, something like $1 billion in this campaign. Really didn't help. They got crushed when all was said and done.
So Khanna, in a way, is talking about himself, right? He said there are people across the country in their 40s and 50s that need to kind of jump in and lead this party. He's kind of talking about himself there. So we'll have to see. We don't know if he's going to run in 2028 or not. I'll get to that poll towards the end of the show because I do want to see how you guys feel about that. But I interviewed Khanna. He's one of the few that is willing to come on to smaller independent media. Even if you grill him, he's still willing to come on. And I was really angry at that time that I interviewed him. So I don't think, like I said, I don't think he'll ever come back on here. But it's really interesting that it's okay to say these things now. This is part of the games that people play. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super sticker, Linda. Thank you. Dublin, what state is he from? California. Oh, yes, because one of the choices on the poll is who is Khanna. Right. I had to assume because not everybody may know who he is, but he's from California. Thank you, Fuzzy. Sorry, Sabby. Tennis balls just wasn't funny. Thank you, Cooper. Wow, Jake Paul won. I thought that was at 11. I thought that fight didn't happen till 11 o'clock. Am I wrong? Let me know. Did I miss something? Hold on. Let me see. I mean, I would think I would have gotten a text if it happened already. Thank you, Archer, who's been a member for 6 months. I'm 65 years old, and identify as ADOS. Also, Generation Jones. Google it. Thank you, Sabby. You're the best. You keep me optimistic for the future. You are fire. Thank you, author. Thank you, baby Ethernet. We knew Dems were unserious when Biden ran in 2024. TL says Mormons don't knock on my door no more. Same. Maybe they don't do that anymore. They used to knock on my door. Mormons, Jehovah Witnesses, and the calculator guys. The guys who used to sell the calculators. Thank you, Jasmine. Words of Malcolm X. We are not outnumbered, but out-organized. I will be talking about Malcolm X on Sunday with breaking news about his family. So I'll be discussing that there. And thank you, Raven. We need to make third party a serious force over 4 years. I agree. And we got to focus a lot on those congressional races, right? Like not just the presidential races. We need to get third party candidates in Congress. We really do. And shout out to Fat Man TV for becoming a Sabby member. Thank you. Hey. All right, guys, go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. All right. Now it's time for announcements. I do have a quick announcement about Rome. Rome is my comrade from Revolutionary Blackout Network. I told you guys about this briefly. I want to just make this a little bit smaller. Okay. Rome needs help. So for those who don't know, Rome needs a lawyer. He is, let me put this here, community activist, citizen journalist. Rome has clothed and feed, thousands of houseless people across the country with his outreach and activism. Rome suffers from manic highs and lows. He has episodes and can say alarming things when he is in one of his psychosis. He had a medical emergency, and after that, he was brought up on serious charges. Now he is in desperate need of legal help. He is facing 20 years. The least expensive attorney, this is coming from his girlfriend, that she could find was a $6,500 retainer. We have already raised $1,200. Now we need the $5,300. I think they're already, So it says they've raised $6,077. Let me just check this one more time. Okay. So it looks like they need, So I'll put the GoFundMe link in the chat. Again, for those who don't know Rome, I mean, many of you in the chat do know him. But for those who don't know Rome does a lot of mutual aid. We do mutual aid over at RBN, and Rome has helped a lot of people. And now it's one of those moments where Rome needs our help. He needs a lawyer, right? So I wanted to share that with you guys there. And looks like they're doing really well so far for donations. So that's good news, right? Okay. Thank you. Based. You're welcome, Charlie. You're welcome. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I shared that. Thanks. Random, what are the charges? I can't talk about the case. Legally, I can't. This is why he needs a lawyer. So what they're trying to do is raise money for the lawyer, and it looks like they're almost there. So that's good. Okay. Mika said Khanna did not attend Netanyahu's speech to Congress and also has called for a ceasefire and an end to it, weapons being sent. It's interesting. So again, child of God, I can't talk about the case. So he's trying to get a lawyer. Thank you. Okay. All righty. Thank you guys so much. We're moving on now to the next story here. Do you guys remember Professor Alan Lichtman? He's the professor that predicts who is going to win presidential election. And apparently he has never been wrong. I told you I didn't agree with his keys this time around, and I'm going to dive into that and show you where I disagreed. Well, Alan Lichtman apparently, I guess, was not doing any interviews after he was wrong for 2024. The day after the election, he decided he was not going to do any interviews. He wanted to, I guess, take time and figure out where he went wrong. But now he is doing interviews, and it seems though he's had time to sit down and figure out where he went wrong, but I still disagree with him. Like that's like, so 2 appearances here. The first one is on CNN. The second one is on News Nation. Let's get into the CNN one, because I still don't agree with his assessment. And you guys can tell me what you think. Let's get into it.
He's been called the Nostradamus of elections. He's correctly predicted 9 of the last 10. That is until the early hours of Wednesday morning, when CNN predicted Donald Trump would win the presidency. I'm talking about Professor Alan Lichtman. He says his 13 keys are how he makes his predictions for the White House. Here's the moment he realized his prediction was wrong.
This is funny.
I'm starting to get a little nervous.
Yeah.
She needs to make up 170,000 votes.
I don't see it. The big Democratic counties are mostly in.
No, yeah. Shit.
I just don't see it. Good thing I have nothing to do tomorrow.
Yeah, I took off work tomorrow.
And I'm not doing any interviews.
Good.
I'm done with that.
So what happens to the keys now? Well, Professor Alan Lichtman is here with us tonight to tell us what he thinks went wrong. Professor, thank you for joining us tonight. I mean, we've talked many times. Were the keys wrong, or was your interpretation off this time?
I think the fundamental problem was the keys, not my interpretation. No one's convinced me that was wrong. There are unique features. I've always said, some unique features could break the patterns of history, and I think that's happened here. First of all, a unique feature specific to this election. And you've heard me say this before. I was very critical of the Democrats for openly and viciously trashing their sitting president right out in public. I have never seen that before, and I've studied politics since the founding, and we saw Biden's approval rating plummet as they were doing that. I think that extended beyond Biden to weaken any Democratic candidates, since they're discrediting their own administration. Secondly, it rendered problematic one of my keys, the contest key, since we couldn't have a primary, but the Democrats did unite around Harris, and I turned the key in their favor, but we had never seen anything like that before, and that was problematic. But
pause. See, this is where I disagree with him. This is one example, the primary issue. See, he keeps saying we didn't have a primary, we couldn't have a primary, but he leaves out that people did run against Joe Biden in the Democrat primary. He leaves out that a candidate like Dean Phillips was able to get 22,000 votes in New Hampshire. He leaves out that Marianne Williamson dropped out of the race and then re-entered the race because she was getting thousands of votes as well. So even though there wasn't an actual debate, et cetera, and those candidates weren't acknowledged the way they should have been by corporate media, those candidates did get votes. And they got votes not just in places like New Hampshire, but also in some of those swing states. Dean Phillips, for example, is from Minnesota. So he's from the Midwest. You don't think that he had fans out there who did, you know what I mean? So this is the part where I disagree. And maybe he doesn't see it the way that I do, but to sit here and to pretend like those 22,000 people that voted for Dean Phillips in New Hampshire, or those thousands of people that voted for Marianne Williamson, or the thousands of people that voted for, who was the other one? Well, RFK had left and he went to the Independent at that point. And then Chink, I guess, really doesn't count. So we'll stick with those two. To pretend like there was no, and then RFK Jr., remember, he was running as a Democrat first. He was polling at one point at 19% as a Democrat candidate. So even though he wasn't on the ballot for Democrat primaries, he still gave people another option. So to pretend like those people didn't have any effect in any way, shape, or form, I just don't believe that. Let's continue.
More importantly, are trends that are long-term and affect the long-term future of our democracy and the keys, because the keys depend upon a rational, pragmatic electorate deciding based on governance whether the incumbent party should get 4 more years. And we've seen the explosion of some trends that have existed before, but not to this extent. Disinformation. You know, Elon Musk is, I don't know how many hundreds of billions he has. He has been the director of misinformation. 2 billion views of his spreading of disinformation, not just about the economy, but about immigrants, about minorities. We've never seen disinformation at this scale. Next, we have never seen to this scale the agitation of 3 trends that have been very deeply embedded in American history: misogyny, racism, and xenophobia. You know, the first anti-immigrant law was 1798, and Donald Trump wants to revive it. You know, first.
Stop. I'm sorry. See, it just, okay. The first part there. So one of the things that he's claiming is, well, my keys didn't adjust for disinformation. And he's blaming Elon Musk, blaming Twitter, right? He said, oh, there was all this disinformation out there and it didn't adjust for that or whatever. First of all, define disinformation. Is disinformation something that you just don't agree with, or is disinformation independent media? We always got to ask this question, right? That isn't to say that everything on Twitter is true, but let's be real, okay? All right, everybody who voted isn't on Twitter. And if we think about most of the people who do vote that are over the age of 65, a lot of them are not on Twitter. So when you talk about disinformation on Twitter, the majority of people who vote are not on Twitter. So I don't know, you know, I invited Professor Alan Lichtman on my show, by the way. I invited him on. He didn't respond. I invited him on because I wanted to explain this to him in person. I can understand if the majority of voters are on Twitter, but the majority of them are not. The majority of the demographic that heavily is consistent with voting, the majority of those people are not on Twitter. So I don't understand what you mean about Elon Musk and all this jazz. So let's just put that to the side. Now, the other thing, he brings in racism, misogyny, and xenophobia. Those things have always existed in this country, fam. This is a new thing. Why are people pretending like this just became a thing in 2024 because Kamala Harris lost? That is not a new thing. That existed when Barack Obama was running for president. People forget this. What are you talking about? You don't think there weren't people saying racist things about Barack Obama when he was running for president? There were. I remember. So stop. Misogyny. Well, there were some things were said about Hillary. So stop pretending like these things just became a thing in 2024 because Kamala lost. Jesus.
It was the French, then the Germans, then the Jews, then the Mexicans, then the Muslims. There's always another. And of course, you know, racism. We didn't even begin to dismantle Jim Crow until the 1960s, and it's still to some extent survived.
Stop. Barack Obama won twice. Stop it. Now it's all about we didn't dismantle Jim Crow. Yes, these things are true. But Barack Obama won twice. Not once, twice. And when he won the first time, he kicked John McCain's ass. Go look up the numbers. This is not to say there are no racist people. Yes, there are. And yes, some people would not vote for her because of her race, just like some didn't vote for Obama because of his. But that was not the majority, fam. Stop. Oh, my God. These academics, man.
Women didn't vote until 1920. So that calls into question the whole premise behind the keys and behind our democracy.
Well, if it calls into question the premise of the keys, what about the fact that the pollster Nate Silver says that he used your keys to predict a Trump win?
And so did I. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you how I used his keys and I got the exact opposite response. Listen to what he says.
Nate Silver has been criticizing the keys since he attacked me for my correct prediction early of Obama's reelection in 2011. He has a vested interest in going against the keys because they put him out of business. And look what he did this year. This is typical Nate Silver. He says Harris is marginally ahead. So the election is going to be, so close, 50-50. But it could go either way with the swing states going one way to one candidate or the other. And he says, my gut favors Trump, but don't listen to my gut. So no matter what happens, Nate Silver can't be wrong and he can't be right because his predictions are meaningless.
Actually, Nate Silver basically walks the line, guys. Nate Silver walks the line. So that way he's like, you're not going to point at me at the end of all of this and say, I said that person couldn't win.
Admit I was wrong because I go out on a limb and tell you who's going to win or who's going to lose, and I don't try to squirm out of it. And as we're having this discussion, I'm very squarely trying to consider why I went wrong, what it means for the future of our keys and the future of our democracy.
Given the fact that you talk about some of the disinformation, which seems to be the trajectory of a lot of things dealing with the democracy, do you intend, Professor Alan Lichtman, to change your keys or adjust to an additional, maybe a 14th one to adjust for that factor?
I don't intend to change my keys on the fly. That's a recipe for disaster, particularly when these critiques come post hope. It's very easy to say what you should do when you know the answer already. Much more difficult to do it in advance. And the keys go all the way back to 1860 in development and back to 1984 predictively. So I'm not going to very quickly change the keys based upon some critique that comes after they know what happened. But I'm very seriously going to reconsider. And I'm also wondering, are we going to have a free and fair election in 2020?
Oh boy, here we go with free and fair. Honey, Connie said he doesn't admit he was wrong, though. He blames the keys. And you know what? That's a good point, Connie. Also, on News Nation, same thing. Same thing on News Nation, right? So watch this. I just can't. Oh my God.
Wins the election in 6 days.
That's right. It's possible, but a lot would have to go wrong for Harris to lose.
So it was possible and it happened. Why? And how does that change the reckoning of what the keys mean and how they should be applied? Professor of American History at American University, the father of the 13 keys, Alan Lichtman. Good to see you, Professor.
Always good to be with you, and I do have a pretty deep explanation.
Oh, I want to hear it. So I just want to say off the top, you're a friend of mine, and I don't like people coming after you, especially after the fact. It's like, one side was mad at you when you made the prediction. Now the people are mad at you after the prediction. I'm sorry, but, I guess these days, perversely, it's a sign that you're relevant, Professor. I guess you can sell it to yourself that way, but boy, do people suck. What did you figure out about the analysis of the race?
Yes, as I said, things could go wrong. There could be unprecedented events that change the pattern of 160 years of history. That's what happened here. Two things. Number one, disinformation. We've always had disinformation, but disinformation has exploded to an unprecedented degree. You talked about a grievance election, but a lot of that grievance was driven by disinformation. Starts with Fox News and conservative media, conservative podcasters with tens of millions of views. But we've seen something brand new this time.
So did you notice what he did? He's making it sound like only Fox News is biased and pushes propaganda, and that MSNBC and CNN don't. Everybody see that? Okay.
The 300 billionaire Elon Musk putting his thumb on the scales through his control of X, formerly Twitter. It's been reported that his misinformation has had billions, literally billions of views. And this is spread to every aspect of this election. There is misinformation about everything about the economy, inflation, jobs, unemployment, the stock market, growth. There is.
Are you going to tell people that their own pockets and their own bank accounts is misinformation? Like they don't know what's in their bank account. They don't know what the grocery store prices are. Like, how is that misinformation? Like, people don't have to watch cable news to know how much the grocery prices are. The average working class American is not paying attention to the stock market. They're looking at the prices. They're looking at their bank account. They know when prices increase. How is that misinformation? You know, again, these academics, man.
Vast disinformation about undocumented immigrants, you know, that they're supposedly killers who are out to get you. In fact, studies by Cato and the National Institute of Justice show undocumented immigrants are the most law-abiding segment of our society, committed crimes and violent crimes, less than half that of native-born Americans. It's
the majority of voters in the swing states, though, their vote was not swayed about violent immigrants. The number one issue was the economy. The economy. Like, it just, I don't know, like what.
Spread to the hurricane relief, spreading lies that hurricane relief dollars were being diverted to migrants. It's lies about the Ukraine war, that somehow Ukraine was responsible for having one of the world's great powers invade a third or fourth rate power. And, you know,
No, you see, you guys, you see what I mean? He's a shit lib. That's what he is. Ukraine provoked Russia. So it almost seems like Alan Lichtman is using some of his own bias to determine whether or not the keys are going to work in such a way to produce the outcome that he wants. At least that's what's it sound like for 2024. I was shocked when he said Kamala Harris was going to win this and she was going to be the first. And, you know, I was kind of like, really? I didn't see that energy on the ground at all. And maybe if he wasn't paying attention to the keys and he was paying attention to what the voters were saying, particularly those that are working class, maybe he would have had a different prediction.
Scholars have shown once you dissolve truth, democracy dissolves along with it. The way authoritarianism takes hold, and is taking hold all over the world, not just here, is not through force, but through the manipulation of information. As George Orwell warned in 1984, you know, in that dictatorship, war is peace, famine is plenty. The other thing that's unique about this election is the explosion of elements that have always been present, the dark side of American history, but that have been agitated to an unprecedented degree in this election. And I'm talking about racism, misogyny, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, with a woman of color being a particular target. And these things cross ethnic and racial lines.
Notice he mentions anti-Semitism, but he doesn't mention Islamophobia. So again, he is, you know, Alan Lichtman, I think, lives in his own bubble. From what I was told, he didn't even create these keys. Also, someone shared this on Twitter that in his book, originally, these 13 keys predicted the popular vote. So I don't know, like, you know, it just seems kind of all over the place to me. But I am going to say this. Let's play 13 keys. Let's play the keys, because I'm going to show you what I came up with. Hopefully it's big enough for you here. Yeah, you guys see that? Okay. Here are the 13 keys. And I'm just going to go over the ones that I selected. Now, the way this works is I believe that if there's 5 keys that turn, then you're fine. But if there are more than 5 keys, then that means that the opposition will win. So if you're the incumbent and you have 4 keys that, you know, go in that direction, then based on the 13 keys, you're going to win again. you'll win re-election. But I picked out more than 5. And this is where I disagree with Alan Lichtman with this particular presidential election. Let's start with number 2. No primary contest. Now, this one I left up in the air and I made it green. The ones that I am calling out are yellow, but I want to tell you why I made this one green. There is no serious contest for the incumbent party nomination. So if you notice in my notes here, I said under Biden, when he was the nominee, yes, there was Marianne, there was RFK, and there was Dean Phillips. They didn't have debates, but these people, RFK dropped out and ran independent, but Marianne and Dean Phillips did get votes in the primary races. So something that Alan Lichtman did that I don't know if everyone noticed, I noticed he did not make his prediction until after Kamala Harris was named the nominee. Coincidence? It just almost seemed kind of weird because he had an interview before then and he was asked, are you ready to make your prediction? Who you think's going to win? And he said, I'm not ready to make it yet. That's when Biden was still the nominee. But once Biden dropped out and Kamala was the nominee, then he made his prediction. So it almost kind of makes me wonder, did he have inside information that Biden was going to be stepping aside? And is that why he didn't make that prediction then? Makes you wonder. He's in DC. He teaches in DC. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Okay. Think about that for a second. Now, when Kamala enters the race, there is no primary contest at that point. But at the time, under Biden, there wasn't a debate, but they were on the ballot. So what that said to me is that there were people who still wanted either Marianne or Dean Phillips because they did receive votes. So think about that for a second. Okay. All right. Now, so I made this one green because I said, okay, well, I want to point out something about this, but maybe I won't change that one because the candidate changed. Let's go to number 3, incumbent seeking re-election. The incumbent party candidate is the sitting president. See, here's another one. No. Remember, this changed. So in the end, the incumbent party candidate was not the sitting president. It was Kamala Harris, the vice president. So I turned that key. Everybody see how this works? See, these are tricky because this election was different. So that was a tricky one. But I'm saying, yeah, this one is turning. Number 4, and he disagrees with this, no third party. So first of all, the way that this is worded, it doesn't fit the definition. It says no third party, but then it says there is no significant third party or independent campaign. Well, to that, I push back on Al and I say, define significant. What do you mean by significant? That can change. So I am turning that key and I want to tell you why. It's not like it was just one person in particular. You had Jill Stein, you have RFK, and you had Cornel West. All of them were running at the same time. And even though RFK Jr. suspended his campaign, he still was on the ballot in the swing states and he received over 700,000 votes. Alan Lichtman was given multiple opportunities during interviews to change his prediction. And he said, no, I do not change my prediction. I keep the prediction the same. If I was him, considering that RFK Jr. was not being removed from the swing states, I would have changed that prediction. So there's that. This is just how I would view it. Because like I said, no third party. But then when you look at the definition, significant, define significant. You had 3 well-known people running. So think about that. The next one that I turned was number 6, strong long-term economy. Real per capita economic growth during the term equals or exceeds means growth during the previous 2 terms. So if I were Alan Lichtman, I would revise this, because the number one issue was the economy. Most voters said that was the number one issue. So I would change that definition, but to that definition, I said growth not exceeded. Whoops. Where am I? Here we go. Growth not exceeded. Biggest complaint was Biden economy compared to Trump economy. I turned that key. How many keys have we turned? 3. Okay, let's keep it moving. I disagree with him on this one. Number 8. He said that there was no social unrest during his first interview with Chris Cuomo. Highly disagree. Social unrest. There is no sustained social unrest during the term. I said the Gaza protest was social unrest. He disagrees with that. He said it to Chris Cuomo. He said the Gaza protests do not count as social unrest. People were protesting for over a year. Students were camping out across the country. I'm not just talking about the campus protests. I'm talking about the marches in DC. I'm talking about the marches around the world. People are still protesting for Gaza. You just don't hear about it as much because mainstream media stopped covering it. But he said on News Nation that the Gaza protests did not count towards social unrest. I heavily disagree with that. The youth vote was heavily affected by Gaza. The numbers show that, the polls show that, the exit polls show that. He was incorrect there. Moving on. Number 10, I turned this key. No foreign or military failure. The incumbent administration suffers no major failure in foreign or military affairs. Again, define major. What do you mean by major? So this is what I selected. Weapons and funding to Israel and Ukraine. Now, why do I say Ukraine? Ukraine is losing. They've been losing. Zelensky comes into DC and walks out with a blank check. We keep giving them money and giving them weapons, but they are losing. So I said Ukraine. The second one is the weapons and the funding to Israel. Israel, in a way, is already lost. Yeah, they have destroyed Gaza, but considering what Israel has done to Gaza, to the West Bank, and also to Lebanon, the world's perception, the military view of Israel has lost tremendous support. So I do not consider that to be a success for the Biden-Harris administration. I don't. So I turned that key. We can differ on these, you know? You may not agree with me on some of these, but this is just how I see it. And this one, I also think it should be worded differently, but I'm going to tell you why I turned this one. 13, uncharismatic challenger. The challenging party candidate is not charismatic or a national hero. Here's the thing. I don't even know if charismatic is necessarily the right word to go with. I put Trump was more chill. I just more chill, because you can be charismatic but not be likable. You can try to be charismatic but not be chill. And what we noticed from Donald Trump is that he is able to talk to anybody, any place, anytime. We see Donald Trump going to UFC fights. He sat down with The Undertaker. And I don't know if everybody's into wrestling, but Donald Trump, he was with The Undertaker from WWE. Stuff like that. So, you know, he calls it charismatic. I'm like, I call it chill. Maybe he should change that to likability factor, because even though people are like, the media would have you think that all these people hate Donald Trump has a likability factor, and Kamala Harris was the underdog with this. And people didn't believe me when I said this. She was the underdog. She wasn't likable, especially when she stood there and she said, I'm speaking. If you want Trump, keep it up. Otherwise, I'm speaking. People see Donald Trump going to Joe Rogan and laugh it up with Joe Rogan. People see Donald Trump at the barbershop laughing it up with people. Remember, Donald Trump used to be in rappers' music videos. So even though you may not agree with Trump's previous presidential term and the way he handled things during this particular campaign, Donald Trump had a likability factor. So I turned this one because at the end of the day, he was kind of seen as a martyr. And I said this over and over again. He was shot at. They took him to court. Somebody tried to shoot at him again. All these different things. And then after all of that, he went to the UFC fights. It seems like if you invite him to anything, he go to it. Whereas Kamala wouldn't even go sit down with Joe Rogan. And more is coming out about that, by the way. That her team said it wasn't a good idea. Again, I don't know who these advisors were, but that was terrible. But I turned this many keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I turned 6. And then this one is debatable. The no primary contest is debatable. So you guys can let me know, maybe you feel differently, but I don't think, again, this election was different because the incumbent dropped out. And I still find it strange that he didn't make that prediction until after Kamala Harris was named the nominee. You guys let me know. What do you think? But I see it as games. Alan Lichtman playing this game because I think he used his own bias. He probably said to himself, there is no way in hell that this country is going to elect Donald Trump again. And here we are. Let's go to some of the comments. Thank you, Raven. We need to make third party a serious force over the years. Oh, yeah, I said that. I'm sorry, Raven. Sorry. FM. 13 keys like a janitor. None of them open anything. FM is funny. Thank you, New York. How many voted for her because she was a woman or black? That's another good point. Yeah, some people did, right? Just like some people voted for Obama because he was black and they said we wanted a black president, right? Let's see. Thank you, Meisben. Disinformation narrative is as new as Johann Sebastian Bach. How do you beat disinformation? Research and true proven information that stands. Thank you for the super sticker, VS Need. Thank you, New York. That podcaster supports UBI, same-sex marriage, legal drugs, woman's right to her body, and anti-war. Worst conservative ever. Thank you, Phenomenal Mysticism. Kamala Harris also lost the popular vote because she alienated her base in deep blue states like New York and Illinois. Yeah, Trump gained in some districts in New York where Biden won. Thank you, Goba. Sabby, you are doing the shit libman keys wrong. You need to put on your voodoo hat first. Thank you, Fuzzy. Tulsi Gabbard was forced out of the Democratic Party because she strongly opposed our regime change ventures in Venezuela and Syria and the Ukraine war. There's no legitimacy left in the Democratic Party. And thank you, Dupe. Problem wasn't the keys. It was his bias. He pushed hard against social unrest over Gaza. And now anti-Semitism was a factor? Question mark. Both candidates equal Zionists. There you go. And thank you, Kaimi. Don't make me pull up the graph, Sabby Sabs. Sabby always comes through with the data, always has receipts. And shout out to Kaimi, who's been a member for 2 months. Thank you so much. Yeah. What? We are moving on to our final story. Let me go ahead and pull that up here. Yeah. Okay. So let me come out of here. Okay, I'll look at the email. Someone just said they sent me an email. I will look at it. And thank you, Radical Left Extremists. I sent you an email. Please read. Okay, I will check that out. All right. Okay, we're moving on to our last story. And this one is about Candace Owens and Donald Trump censorship. And we have to do a little bit of a test here, okay? We're going to put Candace to a little bit of a test. You know, Candace has been very vocal about free speech and about censorship. She was censored, obviously. She lost her job at the Daily Wire for attacking Israel. We all know that story. Won't have to go down that road again. But I want you to hear some of the things that she said about free speech and about Israel and about censorship. And then we need to ask a question. We need to ask a question about what is Candace going to do now when you look at the recent statement that Trump just made. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. When Candace was on Piers, listen to what she said about the censorship in Israel. Listen.
Did you ever say or do anything which to a Jewish ear could be construed as anti-Semitic?
Well, let's be clear about all of these topics, whether we're talking about racism, sexism, anti-Semitism. Everything can be construed to an ear when you're talking about a subjective ear that I believe that this is racist. I mean, I could say, hey, Piers, you even asking me questions. And to me, it feels racist, right? A feeling and a fact are two different things. So what someone construes something is meaningless. Factually speaking, I have never said anything that is anti-Semitic. And had I have said something that was anti-Semitic, Andrew Klavan would have simply showed the clip.
Right. A lot of attention has been focused on you constantly referencing Christ is King. Many people believing that although those words in themselves, if you're a Christian, as you are, would not be offensive, that to Jewish people, when they're being whipped up on social media, as they were at the time, by people who are genuine white supremacists and pretty brazen anti-Semites, that being smart as you are, you would have known that to deliberately use that phrase repeatedly in that time, in that climate, was a deliberate act of provocation to people like Ben Shapiro, who obviously are extremely high-profile Jewish people. Do you accept that?
I'm sorry, which time frame are you talking about when you say at that time?
Well, since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Yeah, no. So that phrase, if you're talking about when it began to be a scandal, because I think everyone was quite confused when there was suddenly this narrative that it could be construed as anti-Semitic, which is why it required so much explaining by people of when it became anti-Semitic. I posted a standalone Bible verse, this is just a pure fact, calling for peace. And at the end of the verse, I ended it and said, Christ is King, last November. Andrew Klavan references that. The reason why this even became a scandal is because of Andrew Klavan. Andrew Klavan did an episode called Because Christ is Really King. And then he accused me wrongly of spitting that phrase at a Jew. That simply never happened, as I showed in my first episode back. It was we just made that up out of thin air. I posted a standalone Bible verse and I wrote at the end of it, Christ is King. And then a Jew responded to me telling me to quit my job. So what happens sometimes is then time passes and people try to rewrite history, but we're not going to do revisionist history here. I tweeted Christ is King appropriately following a Bible verse when I was 38 weeks pregnant. And I stand by that proverb and I stand by my declaring Christ to be King as I have done many times in the past.
So this was one of the examples where I did feel like this was blown way out of proportion, not just by Piers Morgan, but by other people on Twitter as well. Listen, I've heard people say that phrase as someone who did grow up in the church. I heard people say that phrase like when I was in church. So if for those of us that are Christian, you know, it is not unfamiliar to us. But that was an example that was used against Candace Owens, where it seems like it started with the Daily Wire, where they were trying to say that, you know, she was anti-Semitic because she made that statement, right? So this is a free speech issue. This is a censorship issue, right? This is something that, you know, is in the Bible. So that brings up the question of the Bible and how do Christians feel about this as well? These are questions people need to ask, you know. I haven't been to church in a hot minute, but these are questions that people do need to start thinking about. Like, how far is this going to go? Especially those of you that are religious and you do still attend church. and you read the Bible. So think about that. That's one example, right? So she was heavily attacked during that time. I think we all remember this. And I want to show you something else as well. This was her calling out censorship and how censorship is used, right, when they are losing an argument. Listen to this. She's using it to define, she's describing the left, but she's correct about how people use censorship when they realize they're losing the argument. So it's like, let's silence that person, right? So listen to this.
Censorship is an indication that they're losing. When you have to start requiring fact checkers, when you have to start trying to encourage people to pull content offline and calling everything hate speech, it's because you know that you're no longer winning the argument. So as just one example, when Barack Obama was in office, we never had fact checkers. We never were told that the internet is not a safe place. We never had safe spaces. And the reason for that is because when Barack Obama was in office, the left was winning, right? The liberals were winning. I was a person that was convinced that they were telling the truth. I cried the night Barack Obama won, like thinking that this was an amazing feat because the media sold that to me. I think they sold to a lot of people. They sold that idea that Barack Obama was going to be the end of all racial strife, right, in this country. And yet it actually manifested a beginning of racial strife from the time that I was a child, right? I had never seen anything like it. Censorship.
Okay, so we can talk about the Obama stuff at another part, but the point that she made there about censorship, right? How it can be used when the side that is trying to censor you is losing the argument, right? So we couldn't say that happened to her with the Daily Wire. You know, they're like, oh, we got to get rid of you. We got to fire you, that kind of thing. We can say that was that thing with them, and also, you know, Piers Morgan and all these other people. And I don't agree with a lot of the things that Candace Owens says, but when it came to the Israel issue, the fact that you can't even criticize what Israel is doing without being smeared as anti-Semitic is ridiculous. So the level of censorship and the lack of free speech that we have in this country is a real issue, especially around Israel and Gaza. Here she is again. Recently, she tweeted this: the left was calling for censorship of the truth without any due process, with the aim of forcing their sick narratives upon the public. Hope this helps. She's referring to this comment here from Ed Krasenstein, which, by the way, the Krasenstein brothers, the twins, they're terrible. But what she said was, you cannot be this dense. You have a right to say whatever you want, but you can face legal consequences if you commit libel with malicious intent. Anyone perpetuating to be a professional journalist should have learned this in undergrad. So she has a point there, and she's referring to Ed tweeting this: President Trump is suing media outlets for $10 billion, accusing them of bias, right? So she responded and said the left was calling for censorship of the truth without any due process. Okay. So all of that being said, here's my question. This recent statement here from Donald Trump, how does Candace Owens feel about this when it comes to free speech and censorship?
And here's what I will do to defeat anti-Semitism and defend our Jewish citizens in America. My first week back in the Oval Office, my administration will inform every college president that if you do not end anti-Semitic propaganda, they will lose their accreditation and federal taxpayer support. Thank you. Truth is, you don't have to do much after that. When you do that, it's going to work miracles. Please sit down. We will not subsidize the creation of terrorist sympathizers, and we're not going to do it certainly on American soil. We're not going to do it anywhere. Next, I will inform every educational institution in our land that if they permit violence, harassment, or threats against Jewish students, the schools will be held accountable for violations of the civil rights law.
So everybody listen to what's said here, right? I don't hear this in reference to any other groups, right? Everybody see what's happening? By the way, this was happening. Don't get it twisted. Don't think that this would not be a thing under Kamala Harris either, because Kamala Harris was criticizing and attacking, and she was smearing those campus protesters as anti-Semitic as well. I read her statement right on this show. You would have gotten the same thing from both. So what will be considered hate speech / anti-Semitic on the university campuses that's basically criticizing Israel? Now, they told the kids not to say from the river to the sea. Okay. Now I see videos and stories of students threatening to get deported because they attended a pro-Palestinian protest. I have seen, again, this is all under the Biden-Harris administration. Trump's not in office yet. These are the things you're not hearing about. The other things that they're doing to those students. So people wonder why you don't see the campus protest anymore, because the universities have been ordered by Congress to crack that down. That's why you don't see them out there anymore with the tents and all that stuff. So keep that in mind. But listen to this again. Pay attention to what is said.
That if they permit violence, harassment, or threats against Jewish students, the schools will be held accountable for violations of the civil rights law. Very important. Jewish Americans must have equal protection under the law. They're going to get it. At the same time, my administration will move swiftly to restore safety for Jewish students and Jewish people on American streets.
So here's my question for Candace Owens. Is Candace Owens going to say anything about that? Is Candace Owens going to say anything about censorship and free speech in reference to Trump's statement about those college campuses? Is Candace Owens going to point her finger at Donald Trump and say, how dare you infringe upon free speech rights? Now, remember, under Biden-Harris, she came forward and she said, those kids have the right to protest. They have the right to do that. Is Candace Owens going to say that under Donald Trump? Is Candace Owens going to play this video on her show and say the same thing that she said to Biden and Harris? Is she going to say that about Donald Trump as well? What happened to free speech? What happened to what about the censorship? Because you see, I'm noticing something. I know all of you are not on Twitter, but here's something I've noticed on Twitter. It seems like to me, some of the people that have been, pro-Palestinian, that have called out the censorship, that are very much pro-free speech, they're not talking right now. They're not saying anything about this video. It's not just her. I mean, we look on Twitter. People are asking, Dave Smith, where are you at? Where's all these people? So all those attacks that Candace Owens received about criticizing Israel, about her right to free speech, about censorship, is she going to say anything about what Trump just said he's going to do? Let's take a look, because there's more to this. Now we can go to it. Look, right now, if you go to Candace's channel, so far, I don't see it. I don't see it, bud. There's Mark Lamont Hill. There's Beyonce was paid $10 million. There's the appointments of Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. There's Melania. And then we get back to 8 days ago. This video is new. I don't see it. We can look at videos. Let's just be sure, because I checked this earlier today. I don't see it, bud. Former CIA officer, Kamala Chronicles, Kamala, Neil Oliver, and that's a month ago. I don't see anything about the free speech. Where is the attack and criticism about Donald Trump going after free speech? Be consistent. We said the same thing to Dave Smith online. We said the same thing. By the way, where is the criticism of this? So we talked about Elise Stefanik, right? Now, I covered Donald Trump appointments on here. She covered some of them. Why hasn't Candace Owens said anything about Elise Stefanik being appointed as the UN ambassador? Why hasn't she said anything about this woman who is not just pro-Israel? This is the woman who went after the college university presidents. That's why they don't have a job. That's the congresswoman who did that. She's the one who wants to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, which, by the way, Twitch has now changed their user guidelines, and their new user guideline says that Zionism is now hate speech. This is all still under Biden-Harris. But again, to the point, why hasn't she said, look at this. This is from Shabazz. During my first congressional testimony, Elise Stefanik pulled me aside and gave me her contact info. Listen to this. If the Harvard Jewish community is ever in trouble, call me. Here is a congresswoman telling these students that if they ever feel they're in trouble, and that could be whatever, that could be someone just simply criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu. You see how far this goes? She tells them to call her. Elise Stefanik. Why isn't Candace Owens saying anything? You don't see Elise Stefanik doing this for Black students, Indigenous students, Latino students? What the hell is going on here? But see, when other groups try to do this for their group, it's called racism, reverse racism. It's called DEI. But it's okay to do that. People got to pay attention to what's going on. Why hasn't Candace Owens said anything about this woman, Elise Stefanik? Just to remind you of who she is. Listen.
Gay. At Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
That woman lost her job. Claudine Gay lost her job. This woman, she was the one who came after the university presidents. And I'm not here to simp for academics, but you have to pay attention to what has happened. So for all the people who supported Donald Trump, why didn't any of these people say anything about Elise Stefanik? Why? Because she's a part of the party. This is the problem with partisan politics. People are more likely to defend their party even when they're in the wrong. So I'm noticing that now that there are more statements that Donald Trump is saying about Israel, Gaza, etc., none of those people criticized him for saying those things because he's a part of their party. Just like Democrats didn't want to really criticize Kamala Harris or Joe Biden for the things that they said. The same Democrats that said, we got to look out for Gaza, they were yelling at the protesters and yelling at people like me who didn't want to support Kamala Harris instead of yelling at Kamala Harris, who told those kids, I'm speaking. It's a cult. And it's one thing. You can like a podcaster. You can like a personality, but don't ever let it get to the point where you can't hold them accountable. Don't ever let it get to the point where you see they're not being consistent and you don't say anything because you like them. One of the good things about doing this show and doing the call in after the show is I actually get to talk to you guys. I actually get to hear your voices. I'm not just talking to you in the chat. And you tell me if you like something. You tell me if you don't like something I did. You tell me if you like something I did do. But either way, you get to talk to me. So the question again, because we talking about the games that people play. Is it really about the party? Or is it really about free speech and censorship? Because if it is about free speech and censorship, then Candace should hold Donald Trump accountable as well. But I don't think she's going to because he's in her party. Partisan politics is a fucking problem. And everybody needs to call it out. I don't care if you like me, if you hate me. I am not going to sit up here and pretend like I don't see what's happening. And I know some of you see it too. You can't go around all year going on all these different shows talking about Israel came after me and all this. And what about free speech? What about censorship? Protect my rights and all this jazz. And when Trump wants to do censorship, you have nothing to say. Fuck that. And it points to something else that I said before. Both parties support censorship just on different issues. The one issue that they have in common when it comes to censorship is Israel. Both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party support censorship when it comes to Israel. But both parties support censorship. Ask her. Ask her. Those of you that watch Candace, I have no contact with Candace. don't know how to contact her. I have no contact. I would ask her this myself. Is she going to hold Trump accountable for censorship? Just a question. Ask her. The next time you watch her show, those of you who do have contact with her, ask her. Say, Candace, are you going to talk about Trump trying to censor the colleges over Israel? Ask. And if you're afraid to ask, you need to ask yourself why. That is a Rizap Games People Play. That's tonight's theme. Hey, hey, hey. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, radical leftist extremists. I sent you an email. Please read it. Yes. Actually, hold on. I'll come back to that 1 second. Thank you, Michael. Please check your email about free community college education in Massachusetts. I'm already aware of that, about the free community college. So most of us here are aware about that, Michael. But thank you. V said she won't criticize Trump. Are you going to criticize Trump on Israel? Like, again, if she hadn't been going around saying all this stuff all year, I wouldn't even bring this up. But she did. So is she going to criticize Trump on Israel too? Thank you. None of your business. Invite Candace on your show. Let us see. Give me contact information. I have no way to contact her. Let me know. Give me contact. If you have it, give it to me. I will do so. Thank you, Marvin. APAC money buy you desired answer / results in politics. Yeah. The poll. Let's show the poll really quick. I don't have Eric with me tonight, guys, so sorry. Eric wasn't feeling too well. So wish him the best. We've been talking about it, you guys. I'm telling you. Let's see. Those of us over to RBN, we've been talking about it. We've been seeing what's happening, and I'm not shy about it. Where is... okay. Let's bring up the poll. Oh, this is interesting. All right, I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see the poll results. I'm actually surprised with the results of this poll, to be honest. Can people see it? I'm sorry you're looking at me and that. Let me pull this over here. Where'd the poll go? Okay, here we go. I wish there was a way just to remove the pop out chat. Does it work? Oh, it does. Oh, okay, let me do pop out chat, guys. I didn't know that was working, so let me try this again. Yeah. Okay, the poll. Let's see. Will it let me? Oh, I can't zoom in. Okay. 1,794 votes. Ro Khanna's attacking Kamala's campaign. Do you trust Ro Khanna? 8% of you said yes, he's better than most. 57% said hell no, he's corrupt too. 15% said I'm not sure. And 19% said who is Ro Khanna? Well, those of you who said who is Ro Khanna, hopefully you know who he is now. That was funny though. Remove that one. And then I just want to make sure I'm putting this back. Okay. And let me just go to Rockfin really quick. Yeah, Eric wasn't feeling too well, guys. Sorry. It's that time of year again, so just keep that in mind, guys. But like, people starting to get under the weather here. Okay, I'll just read these on Rockfin because I don't think it's going to let me share it. Rockfin used to have, it has a pop out, but when I do the pop out, I can't sort by the tips. I don't know why they do it that way. But anyway, thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. RFK thought this was still his party. We tried to tell him, but he fucked around and found out. Ignore us at your own peril. The brother said the left is the majority, even though it don't feel like it. I think he's mistaken. Our policies are popular, not us. Everyone fears us. HHS secretary is responsible for issuing out waivers to states who wish to pursue their own single payer healthcare plan. We put that out there to see if it reaches his ear. Thank you for this as well, Roger. This is why you abolish political parties, Sab. Roe was muzzled or else not to get backing. Roger, I'm gonna need you to read through your sentences before you said them. Roe was muzzled or not getting backed by the party to run in 2028. Political parties make politicians dishonest. Politicians need to focus on our needs without being held back by doing what's good for the party first. Free the politicians from entrapment of the parties and abolish all of them. Let's all bring our senators and Congress members up on charges via Leahy. Thank you so much for that, Roger. One more thing, guys, if you get a chance, please check this out. Ronnie Akalik just interviewed Jamal Bowman. So apparently Jamal Bowman is doing interviews on left media again, or independent media. And breakthrough news. I don't want to tell you too much about it. Go watch it. Just go watch it. You might be interested. He had some things to say about Richie Torres, but basically Jamal Bowman in that interview, he talks about what happened from the moment that he got into Congress to the moment that he lost his race to basically AIPAC money. So it might be some things that you might not be aware of. It was an interesting conversation. JB, thank you, JB. Candace always says we need to leave the Democratic. I don't know why my camera was doing that. That was weird. Candace always says we need to leave the Democratic plantation. Is she willing to leave the Republican plantation? No, because there's money there. I'll answer that one for you, JB. Probably not. No, there's money there. There's money. It's a game. You got to know the games that people play. All right, guys, that's it for me tonight. I'll be live again on Sunday, and I think I have some special guests coming on next week, so don't miss that. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.